Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, November 1st, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, it's Casual Friday, folks. My child's candy's sugar teeming through my veins, wearing a soft-collared shirt, and welcoming to the program Heather Parton, or Digby, from the blog Hullabaloo. Then joining us on the program, the former writer and editor at Deadspin. Incidentally, every writer and editor is a former at Deadspin as of this AM. And the former co-host of the formerly Deadspin Deadcast, David Roth, will be joining us. I would imagine Deadspin may come up in that conversation. Also on the program, for the 4th time in the history of the United States, House votes to formally initiate official impeachment inquiry the President of the United States. Meanwhile, the American public is on board, and Donald Trump is now threatening a fireside chat.
Please happen and not be scripted.
Good luck on the second part. Key NSC aide testimony provides re-edification of a quid pro quo. And the Chicago teachers delegates are have voted to end the strike. Full membership to vote soon. I've heard mixed things. Warren drops a comprehensive pay-for on Medicare for all. Democrats launch voting rights suits in North Carolina, Texas, and Michigan, and that's just the beginning. Oh, congratulations. The Keystone Pipeline sprung a leak. That bodes well for Keystone XL. And civilian casualties at a record high in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, Donald Trump flees New York State for the income tax-free sunny Florida, or Palm Beach, Florida. And Joe Biden fades in Iowa. Buttigieg is the new number 3.
Yuck.
Uh-huh. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. First off, let me just say, rest in peace. Jeff Trapp, who was a regular on the old Sam Seder Show blog back in the days of Air America, has passed on. Sad to say. Rest in peace. Appreciate his involvement and all the involvement of all the folks who used to be on that site back in the day. That old movable type blog that we had when we first launched on the Majority Report in 2004 was the first online presence of anything on Air America. If you went to airamerica.com or airamerica.radio.com, the only thing that was there was a picture of a microphone that was not clickable. They hadn't quite figured out what to do with it yet. And they'd already spent millions of dollars already on like 100 pre-recorded comedy bits that nobody ended up using. But they didn't really think to build a website. So the Majority Report Radio, which ultimately became the Sam Seder Show blog, was the only thing there. And we would get somewhere around 20 to 30,000 unique visitors a day on a movable type blog at that time, which was nuts. And we would have per hour of the show, literally 1,500 comments per hour. And it was the Wild West back then. We did not do any moderating or anything like that. And this was at a very early period in the blogosphere. And a lot of those folks provided great contributions. So rest in peace. And all right. Also, some other house cleaning to do. Folks, check out our Instagram page. You can follow us at majorityreport.fm on Instagram and subscribe to the AM Quickie. It is totally free. Now, the other way you can get the AM Quickie is you can either go to amquickie.com, subscribe through there, or you can just use the app at majorityapp.com, and you can get it on the app. And as always, you can become a member of the Majority Report by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. Both the member show, the free show, and the AM Quickie, and an ability to watch the show live, and I am the show, and call the show, all on the app at majorityapp.com. It's been completely refreshed. All right, let's get into this. First off, yesterday, this was actually big deal. Do we have any clip of any of the we don't. We forgot to pull that. Of the vote yesterday. It was a big deal. This has only happened 4 times in the history of the United States when impeachment proceedings have been officially launched. The first was Andrew Johnson. The date escapes me, but I imagine it was around 1868 or so. Later, 1870s. He, of course, became president after Abraham Lincoln was shot, and he was a nut job, and he was basically preventing any of the really progressive bills that the Republicans at that time were trying to push in terms of Reconstruction. He was attempting to thwart. They impeached him in the House. They failed to convict him in the Senate by 1 vote. And my understanding is that they did so because they felt that he was going to lose in the election anyways, and they were excited to get him out. At that time, I don't think they ran on the same ticket, the VP and the president. And then, of course, we had impeachment proceedings against Bill Clinton. At that time, 36 Democrats voted with the Republicans to impeach Bill Clinton in the House. Or I should say the next one was Nixon. There was, I think, 2 Republicans out of like 400. It was like 401 to 2, I think, that was the vote to impeach, to do the impeachment inquiry with Richard Nixon. They never got to a vote to actually impeach Nixon. He resigned before that happened. Bill Clinton, 36 Democrats joined the Republicans in launching the impeachment inquiry back at that time. And just yesterday, the House voted in what was probably the most partisan. I don't know about Johnson's vote, but the much more partisan than it was even under Clinton vote. You had 232 to 196. Keep it right there. It was 231 Democrats, 2 voted no, 194 Republicans voted no, and 1 independent, Justin Amash, voted independent. Here is that final vote right here.
On this vote, the yeas are 232. The nays are 196. The resolution is adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
On the table. And there it is. And so the bottom line is this means that Donald Trump will be impeached, assuming he doesn't resign before the vote.
No way that happens.
And
They'll make us laugh.
That's unlikely.
I mean, some people are actually saying this. I just, it's crazy. I mean, the guy, even just on a self-preservation level, what's the use is he to anybody if he resigns?
It's highly unlikely.
Also more prosecutable if he's not.
Well, so I mean,
true.
this is why some of these guys do stay on. There isn't like a retirement plan for Putin or Mugabe or something.
Right.
Like that's the same model.
Right. On some level, that's exactly right. Now, he also could get hit by a bus, but more than likely,
Have a heart attack.
he's going to
They
be
could do him like they did Gaddafi.
he's going to be impeached by at least that vote. Now, the other two Democrats, one from New Jersey, actually, and where was the second one from again? I can't remember. It was Minnesota. It was Colin Peterson, Jeff Van Drew. Those are both Donald Trump districts. Now, there was 31 other districts. Trump only won by 5 points in Van Drew's district. I don't know, what he's thinking, but it's quite possible that Van Drew and Peterson, once they see the evidence, will then vote for Peterson much more less likely. Apparently, Trump won by 30 votes there. 30 percentage points. But it's very possible that when Van Drew, at the end of the process, there's enough evidence, he votes then. But either way, Donald Trump will be impeached, and it will go to the Senate. And we don't know what's going to happen there. Susan Collins is probably the only one who is likely to vote for his impeachment, but they're going to be in big trouble because 65% of the Republican Party strongly favors Donald Trump. Strongly favors Donald Trump. If there was a very strongly favors Donald Trump, I would say 64% probably would very strongly.
Oh, yeah.
Favors Donald Trump more than your own family.
More than your own family.
I came and I personally defrauded you on a university course, and you still love it.
He's their daddy.
It is the case.
You like when daddy takes your money? You can really be like my kids. I can abuse you personally.
All right, let's just play this clip before. Let me do this ad first. One of today's sponsors is BetterHelp. And BetterHelp is giving our audience 10% off their first month when you go to BetterHelp.com/Majority Report. BetterHelp gives you access to your own fully licensed and accredited therapist via phone, chat, or video. When you sign up, they match you with a therapist based on your specific needs, and you'll be communicating with that therapist in less than 24 hours. If you're not happy with your therapist, you can switch to a new one at any time for any reason for no additional charge. They have over 3,000 licensed therapists from all over the country, so they have therapists with specialties that may not even be available in your area. And particularly, if you live in a rural area, it's sort of amazing that something like this hasn't existed before now. You don't have to drive to an office. You don't have to sit around in a waiting room. You can do everything from the comfort of your own home. BetterHelp also tends to be more affordable than traditional in-person therapy. They have a financial aid option if you qualify. They're giving everyone in our audience 10% off your first month when you go to BetterHelp.com/Majority Report. That's BetterHelp. The word better, then HELP.com/Majority Report. Also, we've talked about Blinkist from time to time. If you're like me and you feel like you can't find the time to read all the books on your list, well, Blinkist is an app that compiles the key takeaways from thousands of nonfiction books. Everything you need to know is condensed into 15 minutes. You can either read it or you can listen to it on their app. Blinkist is super unique. It has all of these different titles. It works on your phone, on your tablet, on your web browser. You can read 2 books on self-help or on history in the time that it takes you to walk to the subway. It depends on how far away from the subway you live, but you'll find everything from health and self-help titles, like I say, business books included in Blinkist libraries. For me, my biggest Blinkist wins were the 4-hour work week, that Tim Ferriss one. I know I got very stuck on Tim Ferriss for a long time.
You loved Tim Ferriss.
I got very,
Remember when
I
you
got
came
very
and you had
emotionally.
your coconut phase? You're like,
That's true.
I have coconut butter and sardines because Tim Ferriss.
That's right. Well, the sardines, I don't think was Tim Ferriss, but the coconut oil that lasted only a couple days.
I'm going to put butter in my
maybe-
coffee because Tim Ferriss.
I did
said
do
so.
that too. I did that bulletproof coffee. That was from that. But there's also stuff like Fire and Fury, that Michael Wolff book. Like, you don't want to read through the whole thing. This is great to get some of the key takeaways of that, just in case you didn't know that Donald Trump is a horrible person. With Blinkist, you get unlimited access to read or listen to a massive library of condensed nonfiction books. All the books you want, and for one low price. Right now, for a limited time, Blinkist has a special offer for our listeners. Go to Blinkist.com/majority. You can try it for free for 7 days and save 25% off your new subscription. That's Blinkist, BLINKIST.com/majority. Start your 7-day trial for free and save 25% off when you decide to subscribe, and you will, because it's awesome. All right, let's. This was really funny. Kyle Kalinske, who you may know, is a is he BreadTube? Are we BreadTube?
I have no idea.
I don't know.
Friend of show.
But friend of show, Kyle Kalinske,
Secular Talk.
Secular Talk, was on Joe Rogan again, right? This is his second.
I think it might be his third time.
Oh my God, that guy's on there all the time. And Kyle Kalinske was on the Joe Rogan show. Now, this is interesting because in the past, we've heard Joe Rogan say that Dave Rubin, I don't think he came out and said Dave Rubin is dim, but I think he did say something to the effect of, like, there's a lot of times Dave Rubin's in over his head.
I think the phrase he used was cognitively limited.
That's right.
We didn't know exactly if he was talking about Dave Rubin, just to be clear. I mean, one could.
But wasn't
guess
that in the context of that conversation where what's his face?
I think it was before his
Brett
name.
Weinstein said.
I think Weinstein made it about Rubin. If I remember, I think Rogan was doing the like, hey, hypothetically, what if there's this wounded antelope guy who has no idea what he's talking about?
I think
whatever. It doesn't
whatever
matter.
the sequencing was.
He was talking about Dave.
But we don't know. But there's
talking
something
about Sam Harris.
There's a thing called subtweeting, where you're talking about somebody on a tweet or you're writing about it and you don't say their name specifically. I think it actually started out when you didn't at them, and then it sort of like grew into just talking about it. Now, I don't know who Joe Rogan could be talking about in this clip. Let's play the Joe Rogan clip first, because he's talking about, they're talking about the way that people label themselves.
Northern Saudi Arabia this week, authorities knew they had another case of witchcraft on their hands, a capital offense in the ultra-conservative Desert Kingdom. Is that really what it is? Is that conservative? That term, that term is like way too wide.
Pause it. It is. It is conservative. I don't know that I would call it necessarily. I would say it's politically conservative. I mean, let's be honest. The conservative movement in this country right now. You could look at Charlie Kirk got yelled at the other day by some conservative Christians who. That's what they do. They have problems with things like homosexuality. They have things that are pagan. They have problems with. It is.
They hate Halloween.
It is conservative. Now, you might want to say like religiously conservative. You want to get specific, but I quibble, and that's not relevant.
I think both are. I think the idea, like liberal, conservative, it casts such a wide net because.
And then people like to get sneaky and use. No, I'm a classic liberal.
Yeah, because
what is that? What is that?
Exactly.
You're a fucking Republican.
And it's funny because there's actually, when you actually look at the textbook definition of a lot of these terms, they have multiple meanings.
Yes.
So classical
pause
liberal.
it for 1 second. I'm just trying to think, where have I heard this term classic Republic? Keep that where it is, but let's where have I heard that term classical liberal before? I'm trying to think. It's on the tip of my tongue.
What is a classical liberal? It sounds like someone who's a liberal, but perhaps a bit fancier, maybe sporting a top hat, a twirly mustache, and a monocle. Tea time! While that might be true in some specific cases, there's a lot more to it than that, and I bet I can convince you that there's a little classical liberal in you too in about 2 minutes.
Me?
Classical liberalism.
All right,
is
pause
the
it. That is, of course, Dave Rubin. In fact, that is Dave Rubin's. I don't know. It is his. What would you call that? There's got to be some type of literary term for his essence, expressing
Manifesto.
his essence. Manifesto.
Yeah.
Yes.
Core brand
A declaration of Dave Rubinhood. All right. Well, let's go back to Joe Rogan. Now that we know who Joe Rogan could be talking about. I mean, can you name another person who identifies themselves as classical liberal?
No, if I wanted to find others, I'd probably go to Dave Rubin's show and see who he interviewed.
Now, how many of those people who identify as a classical liberal have been on Joe Rogan's show that Joe Rogan comes in contact with? I mean, we're talking about a subset of people that is one. It's Dave Rubin. He's got to be talking about Dave Rubin, right? But maybe we'll hear him say Dave Rubin's name. Let's see.
I think both are. I think the idea, like liberal, conservative, it casts such a wide net because.
And then people like to get sneaky and use, no, I'm a classic liberal.
Yeah, because
what is that? What is that?
Exactly.
You're a fucking Republican.
And it's funny because there's actually, when you actually look at the textbook definition of a lot of these terms, they have multiple meanings.
Yes.
So classical liberal, in some instances, means just like libertarian, because that's what it used to mean back in the day. But in today's day and age, like you said, it could mean you're kind of right-leaning.
Yeah, it's more right of center.
Right.
They call it classical liberal is a very it's a misleading term. If
No.
like classic.
Wait a second. So there's a cut there. Will you go back? I didn't notice that before.
Kind of right-leaning.
Yeah, it's more right of center.
Right.
They call it classical liberal is a very it's a misleading term. If like classical liberal is it's a British term, correct?
Well, I think it originally dates back to, it was a way of describing
that's weird.
libertarianism.
Okay, so there's a cut there. I wonder if he goes on and actually names Dave Rubin. Only Kyle would know. I mean, I'm assuming it was the Rogan people. Maybe Rogan went too far in naming Rubin and then later felt like I shouldn't name Dave Rubin. But we gotta find out from Kyle. I don't know.
Like, what does Joe Rogan have to fear from Dave Rubin?
I don't know that he has anything to fear, but
he would just
also
feel bad.
Yeah, he may feel bad.
Yeah,
He's
he
a
was
wounded
talking
antelope.
about bullying the cognitively limited.
He's a
That's right.
wounded antelope.
But we
He's
shall
nicer
see.
than us.
The Blazes, Dave Rubin lives in his own.
I'm a classical liberal.
Liberal universe. All right. Well, we
probably have a little bit in you too.
But we should ask Kyle about that, or maybe Kyle will do a video and talk about that cut.
Yeah, call him up.
Do they cut often in Joe Rogan's show? My sense is they don't do that.
I don't watch enough to know.
I don't know.
No, I watched like most of the Barry Weiss one to punish myself, and there were not a lot of cuts.
Were there any cuts?
I don't remember.
I mean, doesn't he do it live? I don't know. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Digby. All right. Oh, folks, It's Casual Friday. Welcome back. I'm Sam Seder. This is the Majority Report, and this song will introduce our next guest.
Are you ready for some Digby? Yeah. Are you ready for some Digby? Digby, yeah.
I feel like if someone actually made the effort, that could be a great wedding band song. I feel like
it could. I could see that.
Digby, always a pleasure. Of course, the proprietor of Hullabaloo and a writer at Salon.com. So, Heather, this is it's a little bit anticlimactic because we didn't really need this vote like they did in the past because of changes in congressional rules in terms of what various committees can do on their own. But we saw a historic vote to impeach a president yesterday. It feels sort of, I don't know. I mean, I can't remember when it happened with Clinton, and I was so sort of like, this is ridiculous that I don't know that I don't remember paying attention to it any more or less than my sense is America's paying attention to this vote. But what's your sense of like where this is landing?
Well, I think, I remember the Clinton vote, and I remember that and I mean, this just tells you how things have changed. I think there were 31 Democrats who voted to open the inquiry. That was their big vote to start the process. And 31 Democrats voted with the Republicans. And I think there were a couple of Republicans who defected on the other side. And everyone was so relieved that more Democrats hadn't crossed the line. Clinton was kind of worried that there were going to be, 50, 75, who knew how many were going to actually vote for his impeachment in that original vote. And of course, this time there were two, and both of them are douchebags. So it was, and no Republicans came the other way. So things are different in that sense. But I honestly think this was more of this was Nancy Pelosi sort of laying out the game, in that she showed that she has she can count votes. I mean, whatever you think of her as a strategist or on policy or whatever else, she is really good at counting votes. And so the first vote she scheduled was one that was going to be overwhelmingly Democratic, that she had the full caucus together for the vote. And I think that was something that she had wanted to show going into this process, that the Democrats were
completely unified. Yeah.
And Trump also, in a way, it worked for him. I think we talked about this, and that he needed a vote to sort of bolster the Republicans and say, hey, look, we're all together on this, and show that there weren't any defections, and there weren't. So that worked for him as well. However, polling out today, I think in the ABC Washington Post poll, shows that he's down to 74% approval with Republicans.
Yep. Now, 65% of it is very strong approval, though. I mean, that's what's interesting. He's bleeding, obviously, some of those like sort of shaky ones, and that's about 10 to 12 points down, I think, from where it was at its high.
It is, but this is significant. I mean, he can't win with just his 65% of Republicans who strongly approve of him. I mean, that's a lot of people, tens of millions. We know, that they're out there, but that's not enough to win re-election. That's a very problematic number for him. He really needed to keep, in the high 80s or, somewhere around 90% of Republicans sticking with him to even have a hope. So that's a very bad number. Maybe it's an outlier. I haven't seen anything that low in any of the other polling, but it's interesting if somehow or another in all this that some of the people who've been sticking with him, the types who are saying, well, I don't like the tweets and, but those tax cuts,
Right.
Those kind of people. If they're starting to go, I can't do this anymore. Trump fatigue, which I think is probably it's got to be a thing among, I know I feel it, but I mean, even among Republicans, there have to be some that are just going, come on, you got to be kidding. Now we're going to do impeachment? Oh, for God's sakes. So, I do think that the vote yesterday may have been a moment for Trump that was, it may end up being the high water moment for him as we go into a process that's going to be a lot more fraught for him as the hearings and various, there's new information pouring out every day. And then in the Senate, where I assume he's going to be acquitted, I think it's a very tall order to try and get 20 senators to cross over. I'd be shocked if, I don't know what would make that happen, but even if a few do, or even if it's a very ugly process and there's a lot of information and it's very, this is something that the public watches in horror, I think it's a problem because what we're really talking about is re-election, and this is not going to help him. Let's just put it that way. This isn't going to help.
I want to pivot in a moment because at the end of the day, I'm not quite convinced that it is that impeachment really is that the most important feature of impeachment is about his reelection. I actually think that it has much more implications in the House and the Senate, but I don't want to get there yet because I want to just stay on sort of on Donald Trump for a moment. They're at this thing, and it's possible. I feel like that number in terms of who supports him could really fluctuate. Let's presume that's not, that could be just a glimpse. I suspect that his approval rating's a little bit higher than that. And I think it's also quite possible that there are people when those shaky people, when asked in a poll now, are like, yeah, no, I don't support him. I think some of that bleed is that, and that when they come to vote, they'll vote for him anyways. But we're on the verge now of things are going to get very different. We're going to read all those depositions. And I think, I don't think this is a situation where we're like, wait a second, Bill Taylor actually exonerated him. And they were really mischaracterizing what, that Sunderland lied and all this. Because I think one of the things that came out with this last testimony from Tim Morrison, who was the NSC, an advisor to Bolton, he's mentioned in the chats that went between Sunderland and Bill Taylor, who was the former ambassador to Ukraine, who was working on this, who was sort of like really taken aback at what was going on with all these political appointees. Sunderland was one of those political appointees. He's an EU ambassador, a hotelier who gave $1 million to Donald Trump's inauguration. He was sort of the ringleader working with Giuliani on the outside. Rick Perry is sort of more peripheral, but was definitely involved in all this. But this guy Morrison basically said, from what we understand, and this is all secondhand because we haven't seen the deposition, but basically said something to the effect of like, I didn't think the call was a quid pro quo, but I did refer it to our lawyer because I was a little bit concerned about it. And then he said, I did have a conversation with Sunderland where Sunderland said, the president said this is not a quid pro quo. However, he does want this for that, essentially. And so his testimony reestablishes the idea of the quid pro quo. And let me ask you this, what I think is an interesting dynamic. And I think what, hopefully the Democrats will lay this out in public in a thoughtful way that will feel like it's building on itself rather than repeating itself. Because one of the things I'm concerned about is every time we get another account of how there was a quid pro quo, it feels like it diminishes the amount of stuff that's already on the record. In other words, like, why do we have to keep proving this? We have 4 different elements of proof. Every time we add another one, it makes it seem like the 4 other elements are not sufficient, and that it gives the Republicans the opportunity to attack one narrow one. Like, right? Like they'll go like, well, Vigeland, this Ukraine expert, he really likes Ukraine. So maybe that's why he's doing this. And, Bill Taylor, he was once dropped on his head when he was a baby. And he, do you know what I'm saying here? Like, is there a danger of that?
I think there is, and I think that that's something that the White House and Trump sort of instinctively understands is a way for him to discredit this whole thing. You know, if they really had the goods, would they be doing all this? Would they have to talk to all these people? And of course, we do have the goods. Number one, it's in that rough transcript that was released by Trump, the biggest mistake he's made in his career thus far. It's in there. He says it. We all read it, you know, and he's out there screaming, read the transcript, never linking to it on his Twitter feed, by the way. So, you know, that's kind of a tell. But, you know, we know that it happened because we saw what he personally said. And we understand, you know, we can see that. He came out later and said, yeah, what's the big deal? Yeah, of course, I was after corruption. There's no quid pro quo. I just did blah, blah, blah. But we know what happened. I mean, that is just, it's clear in that transcript. Now, if you're building a case in court, you know, you want to have corroborating witnesses and do all that stuff, which is basically what they're doing with this inquiry and talking to all these other people, trying to build an airtight case. But because of the way that it's dribbling out in this sort of, you know, some of these people have opening statements. One of the reasons why this guy Morrison yesterday, his testimony seems a little bit less obvious, and you know the Republicans raced out to leak their part of it, and then you know we heard things from obviously from the Democrats on the other side. It's because he didn't do an opening statement, or at least he didn't release one to the public, which many of the other witnesses have done. So we're getting this sense of, I think it's exactly what you say, which is one reason, and for the first time, I'm sort of glad they're moving quickly, because I think it's important to stop that particular dynamic from really taking hold. That, you know, gee, they're not really sure of themselves. They keep asking. This is what the Republicans are going to be saying, which is, look, they're going to keep asking until they find somebody who can prove it. You know, and that's not, you know, that's like, you know, they're going to keep looking until they find the votes to get Al Gore elected or whatever. You know, it's the kind of thing that they commonly do. So it is a problem. But on the other hand, you've got Trump and his strategy. It's just inane. I mean, last night they published an interview with the Washington Examiner. He says, we're not going to have a war room. I'm just going to do this, you know, it's obvious. I'm going to have fireside chat where I read the transcript, and we're putting out T-shirts that say read the transcript. I mean, that seems to be the essence of his entire strategy here, is to say read the transcript, which is insane. Because if you read the transcript, it's basically proof that he did what he's accused of. So this is a very bizarre situation. I think a lot of it just has to do with the fact that he's uncontrollable, and you know, the people in the Republicans in the House who were going to be in charge of doing this have proven themselves to be batshit crazy as well.
Right.
I mean, they're just running around, you know, pulling stunts and doing whatever. And they think, look, this worked in the Mueller investigation, which was basically all based upon leaks by certain people who were involved, and the press was revealing certain things, and it was all sort of coming out piecemeal. And Trump had this repetitive, you know, he had this mantra, you know, no collusion, no obstruction, it's a witch hunt, and he denigrated the investigators. And that worked for them, and sadly, I think it kind of did. So they're trying to do a reprise of that, but this is happening way too fast. And they're about to go public. I mean, those transcripts are going to be released, and they're going to have hearings. So,
and the problem is this is being
this
is being controlled by the Democrats. So it's much harder for them to for the White House to sort of control the pace of it. All right, so let's go back to that the other thing though I wanted to mention was that and I think, you know, people should I just want to reemphasize your point about this vote being important to Trump in terms of he wants to lock them in. Like, once you vote against the need for the impeachment inquiry, you have another bite at the apple if you're a Republican in let's say a purplish district, and there's not many of them. There may be not even a dozen or something at this point. But if you, you know, that you take this vote, you can go back and vote if things get really egregious. But essentially, you're in for a penny, you're now in for a pound on that side. And that's why he wanted to make sure there's no defections. Now you're all attached to me. If I go down, you're coming down with me, is basically his strategy, I think, for that. I mean, for me, all of this is about, because I don't know at the end of the day if 9 months from now, it's going to make a difference, or whatever it is, a year from now, it's going to make a difference that he was impeached in the House and not convicted in the Senate in terms of who's going to come out and vote against him and who's going to come out and vote for him. But it seems to me that it's going to make a big difference, this vote, if I'm running against Susan Collins, or I'm running against Cory Gardner, or I'm running against Joni Ernst, or I'm running against Tom Tillis, or I'm running against Sally McAdams. I think it's going to make a big difference in those races. And if I'm running against one of those Republicans who remain in a purplish district, like some of like the Texas district, a lot of those people resigned, so they didn't want to take the vote. I think that's going to make a big, big difference at this point.
Well, it does, and I think that sort of explains the timing issue. And you and I've talked about this a lot.
Yep.
We were both intensely frustrated about the idea that why are we rushing through this thing, and let's drag it out, let's torture him, through
Right.
the whole campaign. Why are we doing this? And it seems like this is really what they had made a decision to focus on. They're not saying it out loud, of course, but this was about gaining control of the Senate. The rush in it is to try and get these, to corner these vulnerable Republicans, and there are a bunch of them. You just named them, and I think there are actually a few more that could theoretically be in trouble if this looks like a big landslide election, and they could be taken down in this, and they are being cornered on this. And the Republicans are you can kind of sense the desperation is starting to pour off of them on this because. First of all, Trump yesterday he had a bunch of GOP senators up to the White House for lunch. After the vote, kind of obvious. And
Nothing
he's
going
on.
Just wanted to see you guys.
Yeah, just
Nothing.
no biggie. Just wanted to check in.
Didn't make the
see how you're
history
doing.
books at all today or anything like that. Nothing.
Exactly, and he had them up there, and he was going on and on about how the call was perfect and all this stuff, and I'm sure they're all sitting there rolling their eyes, going, "Jesus, okay, thanks a lot." And then, there was also reports that he's out there basically bribing them, saying, "Hey, I will, set loose the financial spigots, all the donors, if you make a commitment to backing me in the impeachment." And then the opposite. I mean, he's not giving them any room. He's not helping. That what a normal person would do. He knows that it takes 20, right, to get him normal. He'd say, "Hey, guys, do what you have to do."
Right. I'm willing.
know.
Okay, this is really important, and I also want to make something explicit that you brought up when we talked about this on Ring of Fire the other day, because this, I think, point is really, and it hadn't been something that I had contemplated in terms of rushing it. In all those states that we just mentioned, those senators, for at least the majority of them, I haven't checked every single one of them, but I'm pretty sure it's more or less the same. The deadline to file, if you're a primary challenger against one of those Republican senators, is mid-March. So if the vote comes after that deadline, Susan Collins may feel more comfortable voting against impeaching the president.
Right.
Cory Gardner may feel more comfortable against impeaching the president because the threat that they're going to get primaried by a Trumpista is gone at that point because nobody can jump in the race. But if the vote happens February 12th or February 1st or March or January 15th or maybe even March 1st for that matter, then they are sure to get primaried by some Trump-loving lunatic who is then going to force these candidates who are already stuck in between a rock and a hard place to tack to the right to make up for the fact that they made this vote. And so this is becoming increasingly about those 5 or 6, maybe there's 7 or 8, this could be expansive in that way, Senate seats. And if Donald Trump was smart, he would say, I'm going to release you guys because 20 is when I go in trouble. If 8 of you vote to, against impeaching me, I'll release you. Now, but I still think they have that problem that you brought up about the deadlines. And so those Senate, this is all, it seems to me, about the Senate at this point. And that's what I think everybody needs to sort of like watch this stuff with an eye to those specific senators, because what they do is going to is going to be telling. And, even like a guy like Tom Tillis is like, no way will I vote for impeachment? He can say that, and then it may change after the deadline. But he doesn't want anybody to even think about running against him in North Carolina, because that's a perfect example of a state where, like, if he has to tack any like a step or two to the right, he's in big trouble, it seems to me. And
well, I mean, look at Lindsey Graham. I mean, there's a perfect example. I mean, he's South Carolina, right? You would think he has no worries. He is, he is, in like Flint, and yet he is having to do backflips, twist himself into a pretzel to ensure that he does not get a primary, challenger from the right. This is the dynamic that's driving them in in these senators. And even in places like that, which is as deep red as it gets, there is this fear that if you just deviate even one tiny bit, that you're going to get this primary challenge. And then at the same time, in the purple states, they've really got to worry that, backing Trump, especially, with this new polling, looking, I mean, it is a majority. Even people over 65 are in favor of impeachment and removal now. I mean, this is, this train is hurtling down the track, and they are between a rock and a hard place. And I think you're absolutely right that a lot of this strategy, which I don't think was evident as we were kind of, coming up to it. And by the way, just in defense of those of us who were screaming for impeachment and saying, what the hell is wrong with Nancy Pelosi or whatever, a lot of what Pelosi and Schumer and the rest of the Democratic leadership were doing were floating trial balloons to see what their people were thinking, right? I mean, they needed to know there's a reason why they say and do the things that they do that goes beyond just, there's a political purpose. And that was to gauge the activist left, to gauge the regular, they're polling, they're doing focus groups, they're seeing what people like us say on social media and all that stuff. So I'm not going to apologize for having, put tons and tons of pressure in what small way I can on the Democrats to follow through with impeachment, because it was important that they understood there were those of us out there that were demanding that. But as we see this unfolding, I think we can see the strategy of sort of waiting to this certain point and then boom, kind of putting these senators on, in a really difficult place.
I'm not 100% sure. I've changed my mind a little bit about it in terms of the pacing. Like, I thought this should last till April, and now I think it should last until February. Yeah. But I don't think Nancy Pelosi ever wanted to impeach. I don't think that ever happened until probably 3 weeks ago when they saw the polling. I think, I still look at that reporting that Ryan Grimm did. The fact is during August, when even those frontline Democrats went home, they got an earful from their constituents, and they realized, if we don't vote to impeach, I'm going to lose the only sure bets I have in that district. And so I can't start building on, as we used to say in Risk, you can't go to Irkutsk until you've got Kamchatka. I'm not pronouncing it right. I can't remember, but that was just a dumb saying.
Well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. The August recess was important, and it didn't, it's funny because it really wasn't organized. That was pure spontaneous, backlash from the constituents in those districts. I mean, I guess that Move On did some stuff. There were, impeachment August or whatever, but I didn't get the sense there was just some big.
Well, Tom Steyer was collecting email addresses, so there's that. All right, listen, we have just literally two minutes left here, 3 minutes, but so let's just sort of like broadly speaking. Warren came out today with a specific plan to finance Medicare for all, and it calls for, and her plan apparently is a little bit more expensive than outlined in Bernie Sanders' plan. Now, she is talking about the implementation of Medicare for all, the bill that Bernie Sanders introduced and that she co-sponsored along with about another half dozen or dozen senators maybe. Give me your sense of this, because there's, I'm seeing people saying that this is devastating because this is going to allow Donald Trump to win. And, I think, and this is coming from, sort of more, I don't want to say centrist Democrats, but more sort of like, I don't know.
Fearful Democrats. I mean, this is ridiculous. I do not see this as being politically risky in the way that these people are talking about. I mean, look, none of us, and I shouldn't speak for you, but I'll speak for myself here. I don't have a deep understanding of healthcare financing in this country, or the way that these things are going to be implemented in terms of the details are not things that I am personally going to delve into. I'm not a healthcare expert. I'm not a financial expert. But I do observe politics pretty closely. And I think that in this election, you are in a situation where I think that the electorate is looking, I don't know what they're looking for, but I think it's smart for any politician to think big. We are in a position where, things have gone completely off the rails. I think there is an argument to be made that we need fundamental reform. And healthcare is one area where that has to happen. Now, for whatever reasons, the Democrats have decided that everyone has to put out a highly detailed plan about everything that they're going to do, unlike, say Donald Trump, who said, I'm building a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it, and that was good enough. So the Democrats want more detail, fine. They've got the detail from her. They've got detail from other of the candidates. And I think that what the overall message is there is that we are, if the Democrats take over, we're not just going to, I'm not talking about Joe Biden here, but even his plan is more detailed than in more revolutionary than one might expect from him. But that that they're going to say, look, we're not just going to go back to the status quo. Let's pretend that none of this Donald Trump stuff happened. We recognize that this is a sign that something has gone terribly awry, and we're going to have to fix a lot of things, fundamental reform. And I think that's Elizabeth Warren's brand. And I think that she's, quite good at it. The politics of this, we're all going to squabble amongst ourselves over the details, pretending like we know what they are, and pretending like this plan is going to come, be fully formed and be enacted exactly as the way she wrote it. But the reality is that the signal all of this sends to the electorate is, look, we're not kidding here. This is serious business. We have to do something very, very, fundamental to reform everything, government, healthcare, the economy, all these things have to be dealt with, because look where it led. It led to Donald Trump. And I think it's a damn good message. I really do. I think the Democrats would be wise to embrace it and run with it, because I think people, there's some sense of just kind of, there's a fear in the pit of our stomach, like, geez, how did this happen? Well, the Democrats are telling the people how it happened.
I think it's clear, at this point, Sanders has put out about a half dozen different options that would be pay-fors. Warren got more specific to a certain extent because she was sort of boxed in on her refusal to talk about raising taxes, to talk about costs as opposed to taxes. And her plan, at least from a political standpoint, and I think there's some question as to whether the financing is, ultimately could work this way. I've seen some critiques on that. Some people have said that it's really just more of something like the way that she's offloading a lot of the tax burden on employers is something you could do on a temporary basis, but ultimately employers would find workarounds. That's all well and good. This is her ability to say no raising of taxes on the middle class. Now, she's also calling for things like cuts in military budget to pay for this, which I think that's also a good sort of political message. And I agree with you. This notion of watching people with their hand wringing about a Medicare for all or any of these proposals as to people are not going to want to allow rich people to go to college for free. That's going to be so offensive to people in the general election. Or the idea of Donald Trump's going to get out there and is going to be able to effectively message you're going to lose your private health insurance if you get, full coverage from the government. Is just absurd. In a total sort of normalized, barely people pay attention to politics universe, the idea of hey, out of blue, people are saying you're going to lose your private insurance. I could see what? I haven't been paying attention to anything in politics lately, but I don't want to, wait, what's this whole thing? In the context of the political era that we're living in, the idea of losing my health, private health insurance for everything else to be paid for, to get a complete free ride, it just doesn't have the same political salience that it would have at another time. And I think people have got to get through that through their heads and get with the program. But we're going to talk more about this in the future, Heather. And I appreciate. I think that's a very good first salvo as we head into the next 12 months or so.
Yeah, it's not the last we're going to hear about healthcare in this campaign. I think we'll be talking about it quite a bit. But, I'm glad we're talking about it, and all the big plans. I think they're great. I mean, that's exactly what the Democrats should be doing. Don't cower. My God. Yeah, that'll beat Donald Trump. Let's be afraid. That's a great approach.
All right, let's just all look forward to the series of fireside chats that I hope Donald Trump will give us.
Yes, I can't wait. And the T-shirts, I'm getting mine. Read the transcript. That's the best plan I've heard. I
want to read the transcript. We should be putting out those.
Yes, I think everyone should wear one because I think it's actually a good idea. But let's not buy them from the Trump campaign.
No, I'm going to print them up.
Put them out. Yeah,
I
think it's a great idea.
Thanks, Heather. We'll talk to you soon.
My pleasure. All right, bye-bye.
Folks can check out Digby over at Hullabaloo, or which is Digby's blog.blogspot.com, if you can buy it, if you can believe it. I think it's also, I don't know what else, that's the one I know, and over at salon.com. All right, going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will talk to David Roth, formerly of the former Deadspin. We'll be right back. Back, Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program the former writer and editor, or I should say a former writer and editor at the former Deadspin as of, I guess, today. David Roth, welcome to the program.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
Oh, this combination of dazed and wired that you'd love to feel on a Friday morning.
Right, of course.
It's weird. I feel a little bit better now than I did yesterday. I think just knowing that I don't, know what's coming for us, but I sure was dreading another, week or two of watching things slowly get worse. So
I have been in similar situations, and that is, it's a nightmare. I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. And I think, at least having some resolution gives you a sense of like, okay, this is where the, it's like when you are sitting in an Italian restaurant with your back against the wall. At least you can just see the front door, and you don't think you're going to get taken out from behind.
Yeah. I mean, that was the thing. It all happened so fast. I mean, I felt like I used to joke about this, that I'd had all the different types of shitty online media ownership experiences. And I didn't this is ordering off the menu to keep the restaurant thing going. Like, I didn't realize that the stuff that's happened to us since Monday was like an option. Like the stuff about being pivoted out of a job, like by some like venture-backed thing, like that's fine. I mean, it's not fine, but it's the thing that happens. And then, I worked at Vice, which is kind of, to me, or at least at the time, felt like a strange sort of Potemkin scheme, like kind of pump and dumpy. And I was, there's a lot of that on the internet too. But in this case, like just having some dude come back from vacation like our CEO did on Monday and then decide to like whatever, just push everybody out the door. I didn't think that would happen.
All right. Well, we got to back up because I'm not sure that everybody is familiar with this saga. And so this starts really when Peter Thiel is upset that Gawker has outed him. And he basically starts into process a way of basically suing Gawker out of business. And then you want to take it from there? And that's right?
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't.
No, that's all correct. Okay. I mean, this is years before I started there.
Right.
But yeah, so this is he backed Hulk Hogan's lawsuit against the website for that wound up resulting in a Florida courthouse delivered a large, like a 9-figure damage ruling against the site, which declared bankruptcy. And then, people lost their jobs. It was then sold at kind of a fire sale price to Univision, which was then working on its own sort of like, it seemed at the time like it was like a multicultural youth media push, which is like a cool idea, and there was plenty of room there. But this is where we start running into the really kind of like fraught stuff. Like, if
and was
this
it called Gizmodo at that point?
It was called. Yes, that's worth mentioning. So the Gawker name was gone, and then so it rebrands as Gizmodo Media Group. Gizmodo being the site that deals with technology and all that in the sort of network of sites that was sold to Univision. And the Gawker staffers were distributed among other sites, and then eventually they started a new site, Splinter, that sort of took a lot of that and enfolded it. The Univision thing seemed promising at the time, and again, this was before I was there. I was still at Vice. But the idea there was that it would be a sort of youth-oriented stuff that would be, that would have bilingual, like components, and it really did seem at the time like they were committing enough resources to it that it could have been something cool. They were hiring a lot of people for Fusion, which was a new site they were starting, and they were paying, it wasn't crazy salaries by the standards of other industries, but
unless you were Tim Pool. But go ahead.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah. Well, but they paying him like a major league, like a fifth inning guy, like a long reliever somehow. Do his videos.
This guy was getting. I mean, it depends, I guess, on your perspective. But and he was like in the media world, he was like getting like left-handed closer type of money.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
You love to see a guy that wears a GoPro on his head get Ryan Madsen money. That's what it's all about.
Yes.
So but obviously, all respect, huge fan of his work.
Yes, of course. Right.
But all right. So the thing with Fusion at the time was that, like, if they had taken that money and decided that they wanted to build something that would last and that would do the work that they said it was going to do, I think it could have been cool. But that wasn't what they wanted, because Univision at the time wasn't really Univision. Univision was owned by a series of private equity, like a consortium of equity funds, some of which had like brand names attached, like Haim Saban is like a big Democratic donor, and the guy that I think he literally made his money off Power Rangers. Like
that's right. That
was him. Which,
and
of
whenever,
course,
whenever a Democrat does not criticize Israel, the two reasons are Haim Saban. Generally.
Yeah, so it turned out that Haim Saban didn't actually want to do a multicultural youth media thing, which, in retrospect, you could imagine my shock. What they really wanted to do was something similar to what Vice was doing, which was to grow real fast, demonstrate with all these hires and all this stuff and all these resources that, like, we're big, we're growing, we're ambitious, and that's why we want to sell to you at a high price. And they, for what they were doing, they didn't really build anything that resilient, because they were more concerned on, it seemed like, spending willy-nilly and then demonstrating that they were spending a lot, which was a model that worked all over the internet until it seems like now it's starting to slow down. I don't know if you want to credit Uber or WeWork or any of those things that, like, pegged their whole valuation on how much money they lost somehow.
Well, I think it's
Go ahead.
worth just stopping here because, ultimately I want to be able to like talk about what is going on in our culture. And I think that, what has happened with Deadspin is a perfect example. But we should just sort of like to just, raise this flag up the flagpole a little bit. This dynamic, which is, I think it's always existed, but really in the past 25 years, maybe since the first .com bubble, there is this notion that like you can build value in a company by, this is almost sort of like my daughter's business plan with her selling clothes on Depop. She gets the clothes for free from me. She sells them and makes it seem like she has a business. And on some level, like what has been going on, like this happens in YouTube channels. Like at one point, there's these umbrellas of YouTube channels where, my relationship with my umbrella organizations, I give them a percentage of my money and they help me, sort of optimize my channel. I had people coming to me saying, we'll give you money to be part of our network. And I'm like, I don't get, how do they make money that way? And they don't. Yeah. They're willing to, they want to be able to show like we had $100 million worth of revenue. Now, of course, it cost us $120 million to get that $100 million worth of revenue. But the idea is that bigger, like, private equity or other, companies say like, oh, well, we can cut costs. That's easy. We'll just take the revenue. And they don't quite realize that like, well, yeah, I can make $10 million if you give me $11 million to spend.
Right. So this is what's so strange about it. And this is where it begins to sort of enter, this continuum of like just MC Escher grade nonsense that like took us to where we ended up. Like just all these bizarre thought paths and like forbidden mind realms, like none of which seem to involve owning a profitable business, gathering those profits, keeping some for yourself, and then kicking it forward for another year. That like, this is what's been strange about it, is that all of that sort of like hustling and this attempt to have something and sell it to someone else for more than it's worth, and then, patting yourself on the back for it and trying to do it again. Or what you were talking about in terms of the way that private equity has worked with newspapers, where it's you buy something and then the goal is to make it shittier faster than advertisers can leave.
Right, exactly.
Which is a really strange approach. But it is, for all of that stuff, none of that to me seems nearly as sustainable as the idea of, this is the thing that's always been weird about it. Megan Greenwell, in what I think is like the definitive
I was just going to say this, cite this story.
Yeah. But go ahead.
Before we get that, I didn't mean to sort of sidetrack your basically your TikTok of this. So it's over at Univision. They realize like, oh, we don't really want to do what we thought we wanted to do. So they basically sell it at a discounted rate just to get it off their books.
Yeah, severely discounted. Like this is at this point, like if we're going to stick with the baseball player metaphors, it was sold to Great Hill Partners, which is a private equity firm, for less than J.D. Martinez received this year from the Boston Red Sox.
Wow.
And J.D. Martinez is really good, but at the same time, not the highest paid player on the Red Sox, right? So that's what we're sort of talking about. The step with Great Hill that I think we didn't really anticipate, being sold to a private equity concern was not great. But the reputation that Great Hill had among people that had worked there before, and, media being media, there were people at GMG that had, was that, if you had to be sold to a private equity concern, this was the one to be sold to. That like they were fairly hands off, and that what they wanted a profitable company. They correctly identified that relative to the traffic that we had and the cachet that the sites had, that these sites really were undervalued, and that a little bit of cleaning up after the neglect that Univision had allowed to creep in once it became clear that they weren't all going to make $1 billion off of our dumb blogs, that like a little bit of trimming here and there, like, and then, the guy that I was friends with, our revenue chief, who's like many of the people in those positions since was pushed out or fired. And he always used to say that there was a lot of juice left to squeeze on the site. We really didn't have very much in the way of ads relative to, if you go to Sports Illustrated, I mean, that's always been like a gold standard in terms of journalism, but it's also been a gold standard in terms of like a very difficult website to read. Like browsers hate it. Videos are playing all over the place. Ads are popping up and you have to close them. I guess that's what you have to do to make money on it, but we weren't really doing that much of that. So a little bit of that here and there, and then we're back in the black. And at that point, Great Hill could either sell us, or they could do what owners have always done, which is, keep the profits for themselves and pay us. And I think that would have been fine. But the person that they had as a CEO, who put some of his own money into the purchase and was running our sites, and he's still the CEO there, his name's Jim Spanfeller, is just like an erratic guy and had a reputation as a very pugnacious dude. And so he kind of came in and, that like stupid canard about like first day in jail, you got to find the biggest guy and like go up to him and like stab him with a chicken bone. So like he just like walked into the company and like with a sharpened chicken bone in his hand and was like, all right, so who gets stabbed here? Like, what are we doing? And he continued to kind of, he got rid of Splinter, the news site, a savvy move by any standards, right before a giant year-long news cycle that everybody's going to be reading about.
Kudos for reading the temperature of what was happening in the world. No one I come across is interested in hearing anything about like news or politics.
Well, not
these
now.
days.
I mean, maybe after the big news thing happens, then it's like, well, wait, I wasn't paying attention. What went down?
Right.
And that's where you strike, right? So
Yes.
like December 2020, that's your moment. I don't know I think that in a lot of this, this is what I'm talking about, the continuum of things that don't make sense. Like now we are at the end of it, and this is where we sort of fell off the map. There's no business justification for pushing Splinter out. There's no business justification really for antagonizing the thing that wound up being the sort of tipping point with us, which was this edict that we not do posts on non-sports related things, which had always been a part of the mix at Deadspin. A small part, and a part that did post by post did about twice as much traffic as the sports stuff we did. But, 98% of what we did was sports. The issue there was not, and is not, that Spanfeller is some Trump partisan that hated that we wrote about the president and made fun of him. It was that I think he wanted us to do what he said. And he started with a position that was just basically antagonistic, and he was very aggressive with our editor-in-chief, who later resigned, Megan Greenwell, who was trying to sort of broker a peace between this guy that came in so ready for war and this group of people that just kind of wanted to continue doing our blogs at our profitable and fairly popular website. And that just, there was no getting to yes with the guy. And that was the stuff that quickly became clear, and it's why everybody left. I mean, that there's just, we were never gonna, this thing could have calmed down, but as soon as he had another bad day, it was, just back at it.
Let's put up, I know we have Bernie's tweet with that is up where he says, I stand with the former Deadspin workers who decided not to bow to the greed of private equity vultures like Jim Spanfeller. This is the kind of greed that is destroying. Yeah, he added him. And that is destroying journalism across the country. And together we're going to take them on. Good for Bernie. But I want you to click on Jim Spanfeller, because I think all you really need to do is look at his profile pic, and it all makes sense. It all makes sense. And I mean, honestly, like if I was going to just look on like a, one of those sites, like a Getty site for a stock footage of what I think he should look like, that's the picture I would choose right there. I mean, the one where he's like, he's literally looking up to God, who is taking his photo, it looks like. And
a difficult man. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's not. But it's weird. I feel so naive about a lot of this, especially now, because when he started, like, yeah, he's like a weird, fluffy, kind of like loud guy. But, like, you know, I've had worse. You know, like, or at least I thought I had at the time. You know, in terms of like absolute bosses, like I don't need to deal with those dudes. You know, that like it's the sort of thing where like if his thing and what he said at the start was like, I'm good at like, I'm doing deals, I make money. And, you know, as Megan wrote in her farewell thing, and I think as most of us felt, like we were like, I don't want to, you know, be on a, like in the middle seat on a long bus ride with this dude. But at the same time, like if you want to go make money for our websites, like fine, like we'll do our part and you do your part. And, you know, like once a year at the Christmas party, we'll shake hands and that'll be that. And that just wasn't it. Right. And that's the part of it where like we tried to hold our end up of it. And this is the thing with like the non-sports stuff that he didn't want, that like a lot of those things did gangbusters traffic. And the idea that you had to go through something like my buddy Drew McGarry had this, you know, this weekly sort of, he'd answer reader questions. Like reliably a third of those were just about like pooping, you know, and that's fine. People have questions. No one really knows why we do it. Scientists have never figured it out. And there are, you know, like there's stuff there to answer, and he would give funny answers. But with all of that, if you start getting into parsing the percentage of poop questions versus NFL questions in a Drew McGarry mailbag, then like, what are you doing with your time? Like, how is that productive to us? And why would you take those page views away from us? Strictly so that you could say that we listened to what you said.
This is the most important part of this story. I mean, aside from obviously like the cost to individuals who are working there, but in terms of like a story about what is wrong with a certain aspect of our culture, this is the nub of it. And I do think like, and we should link to Megan Greenwell's piece. It was on August 23rd, called "The Adults in the Room," and she broadens it out a little bit here. And this is why I was so interested in having this conversation, because I went through the same dynamic at Air America, where
I was thinking that this was like one of those like you just can't get there from here things, and like you actually, this is the closest that I could think of previously. But go, speak on it.
Because it's the exact same dynamic. It's like the story that these folks will tell is that there was a bunch of people, scallywaggy types of people who just like, they're on a mission. They don't care about making money. They don't know the hard truths of this and that. But the fact of the matter is that no, these people are idiots, and they don't even, their own egos. Well, there's two different ways to interpret this, and we literally had 5 different ownership groups at the Air America that represented almost every single variant of how management could screw it up. We had this guy Spanfeld. Like I read one piece, like in Megan's piece, where they said like, why would they buy a site they don't like? We had a CEO at Air America who came in on day one and he goes, I want you guys to know something. We're all sitting there. It's like the 3rd time that we've done this, where we gather in the conference room and they give us free pizza and basically say like, here's how we're going to shit on you now. And the guy got up in front of the room and he goes, I want to tell you something. I never even heard of Air America until after I got this job. And he was saying it like,
what a flex.
He was saying it like, that's why I'm uniquely situated to do this job. And we're just sitting there going like, how do you take a job to sell a product you've never even heard of, never mind like you're not even vaguely interested enough to have ever listened to the network. And this was a badge of honor on their part, that it really had nothing to do with the product. And then, of course, there was just a series of stuff like, hey, you're not following the money. But they're saying like, for them, the story that everybody told about Air America was like, they only cared about doing the politics. No, everybody there was like, we know that you need to make money to make this work.
Yeah.
And
that's embedded in the caring about doing, like, of course, like, we cared about our being able to do our commentary or being able to do that stuff. But, like, the only way that works is if they're also making money. Like, it's not the sort of thing where I expect somebody to just, like, absolutely eat shit for an infinite number of years while I, like, do a blog post about being like, are backpacks actually bad? I don't know. Like, here's 10,000 words. Like, that's, you know, you gotta, like, you give to get. I think that we all understood that. But
there's
man,
two elements here that I think are like sort of like can be that can be pursued as a sort of broader dynamic. One is the sort of the low hanging fruit where, like, this guy Spanfeller, I've never met him, I don't know anything about him. His ego is too big to listen to people who are not you know, at the same sort of station in terms of the way he perceives hierarchy. And even more importantly, he understands that his trajectory is a function of being the guy. And if there is a sense that he has that other people are contributing to the success of this, then he's afraid that he won't be the guy. And he may be right, he may be wrong, I don't know. And because he certainly...
Go ahead.
He certainly has, you know, had a tremendous amount of success. And I can tell you that every person who sucked at Air America has gone on to suck somewhere else at more money. And that's, I think, part of it. The other part of it, I think, that may be a little bit less obvious is from one of the CEOs at Air America, who was a radio consultant, who came in and told me, like, we're going to make our radio channel centrist, but our website's going to be the most liberal website out there. We're going to be to the left, you know, we're going to be bigger than the Huffington Post. And I was like, you're the first guy in decades to do a completely horizontal business plan. That's brilliant. You should open up a shoe store and refuse to advertise on either one of those platforms. But for him, it was like success for him was, we need 100x. This is what you'll hear from these venture people when they get behind closed doors. We need 100x. Like what you described as they could make a profit, they could pocket some of the profit, put a little bit back in, and make it work. That's not sufficient for a lot of these entities. They need not to make, you know, plus 5% or 20% or whatever it is profit. They need to make 10 to 100 times evaluation, because they're only in the business to pump and dump. That's it. We need to sell this to somebody else, and so that we can provide for our hedge, because people forget a hedge fund is sort of like the way they used to do television pilots back in the old days, which is, we're going to do 20 of these, 19 are going to fail, but the 20th is going to pay for all of it. And so they're swinging for a home run every time they're at bat. And if they're not going to get a home run, then they want to walk off they want the next batter, because that's their business model. And that is why all this wreckage exists in its path, because they don't care about something that's going to be profitable. They want something that is going to be so profitable it's going to pay for all the other bad bets, because that's the way their business
lets you know how they tend to fail when it comes to, like, websites, say. Like, a blog does not go 10x or 100x or whatever. Like, this is inherently the sort of thing where, like, it's easy. Well, it's not easy, but I mean, you can make a decent amount of money consistently and grow consistently doing this stuff. But there's no way that, like, anything that is as labor intensive and as difficult to do as journalism can make money at that particular scale.
Yes, I think that's exactly right.
Instagram can, because Instagram is, the work is done by other people, and you're paying developers, and you're trusting that other people are going to do that stuff. Or, I mean, it doesn't seem like a very good example anymore, but like Uber or Airbnb or a lot of these places where their gambit was just basically like, well, what if we didn't follow the law?
Right.
Would that be useful? And that, in that case, it's like, if you grow real fast and you raise a bunch of money, and like Uber got to this spot, and this is like, you know, obviously it seems like one of the kind of less urgent failures of the end of the Obama years, but it is one of those things where just sort of letting those companies do whatever they want because it was innovative or disruptive or whatever. I think that it was bad business practice on the government's part because the idea but it sends a very corrosive message, not just to voters and stuff, but I think to rich people, where if the model of the place is you grow so fast that an austerity-stripped government actually can't discipline you, that you've outgunned the state because you have hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars in valuation and all these investors behind you. The FTC does not have the firepower to win a battle against a company like that. And so you let those companies get to this point. I mean, obviously they've all collapsed under their own weight at this point because the basic idea of it was, I don't think they've collapsed, but they're shrinking down to what their actual size is, which is something like a tenth of what they were considered to be.
Right.
And the idea of having something that you know what it is, it grows at a pace that you can control, and you can get a steady return on it, which was always the idea of I assumed that an ownership type would want that. Because the alternative, or certainly would want it more than losing money. And yet it's a question now, as you're saying, what's the hierarchy of what they want? And what Spanfeller, who has a lot of money and has been successful, not necessarily by creating quality sites, but by creating sites that he'd sold at a profit in the past, that I think that for him, and this was where it got challenging for us in terms of not just negotiating as a bargaining unit, but in terms of seeing a way forward, and this is eventually what I think led to the resignation, or at least, was a big part of my personal justification for it, is that if the levers that traditionally work don't work, that if you're dealing with someone who fundamentally only wants to win, and they define that as you losing and capitulating, and if it's the sort of thing where all of the business justifications that might make a compromise workable, or any of the stuff that you can point to say, actually your instinct on this is not right. And if you allow us to continue doing stuff this way, we'll be happier and we'll make you more money. If that doesn't have any appeal to somebody, then it's really hard to know what you can do. Because the only option left then is, just to kind of bend the knee and wait for the next demand or get out.
I mean, I had the same thought about, I see this with podcasting companies that I pay more attention, obviously, to that area than others. But I just don't know that the margins. To me, in terms of internet journalism, or internet-based journalism, the margins are just not there to get, like you say, the 10x or 100x returns that these, for a guy like Spanfeller, the idea of Deadspin making money, right, is not enough. It needs to make enough money so that when he walks into the room, he's the $100 million man or whatever it is that marker is. It's just not enough. It's an embarrassment to just make a profit. And I think ultimately, and I think there's statutory stuff that can help with this. We've talked to, and I think there's, plans in the past that talked about where you have privately owned businesses by families who don't want them to die, but, can't find a buyer where the government steps in and provides a loan to workers so that they can buy it and create a cooperative. Deadspin to me, if I had, I don't know what the operating budget was for Deadspin, but if I had that money and I would just, it had the ability to step in and go I'm calling everybody. You guys are going to get the same salary, same benefits. I'm dumping it in. I will make, I'm dumping that money in. I'm paying for the operating expenses. You throw off a 10% profit every year. I'm getting 10% returns on my money. Boom. I'm psyched. And
it doesn't seem like that bad a deal when you put it like that, because you're making money and you've got a thing that you like. Yeah. It's the only model that's really ever worked in journalism. Although
And
I
then,
do think that there's co-op stuff. Like if we owned it,
well,
then we
that's
wouldn't
my
even
point.
have to listen to that one rich guy. But yeah,
but the point is, like, I could do that as a loan, where you're giving me a 10% interest on that loan. You're paying me back X amount of principal every year, and the ownership of the employees increases. Their equity increases over the course of, I don't know, a 10-year loan or something. I mean, but if the government provided that loan, even better. Like you know, and I think like that seems to me to be the next step for where the government steps in and like I mean, I don't know what they're going to do with this now. I had the page open to Megan Greenwell's piece, and my browser must have timed out because I just got like one of those things like cannot connect, and I was like, holy crap, did they just shut that down? But no, it's I just had to refresh. But I mean, that seems to me to be where it's going. So give me a sense of like.
Well, that's another part. The thing that you just described, I want to talk on that very, very briefly because I imagine we're running out of time. But quickly on that.
Not really.
The thing that happened with your page there is not unique. This is the problem with the ads, and it was what we were initially pushing back with. They loaded the page so far up with ads and with autoplay video and with a lot of this stuff that the site became very, very difficult to use. And this was pushing readers away, and it was like people that, you can't read it on your phone because it dies, and you can't read it in your office because a commercial starts blaring out of the speakers at you and everybody looks at you and thinks you're an asshole. Then like at that point, it's not just a bad stewardship thing. That's bad business. And this was at the heart of the initial complaint that we had, was just sort of like, our website's not working. And it's because you fired our UX people, and the people that are here now are just kind of like following your strange 2007 style instincts.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, this is like, if people want to get a really good taste of that, go to any right-wing blog site that serves in your browser will crash in about 30 seconds.
Yeah, they're all like all these like scammy things where they're just like, you need to like, your flash is out of date. All this like anything that you would see on like, if you've ever like illegally streamed a boxing match, when those same ads are showing up on the website that you work at, you have issues.
I know what you're talking about. Folks can find like European sites that have like 5 different options, and they like lard it up with like, pay for this, and like you have to sort of like almost like it's like an obstacle course to move your mouse around the thing to get the close box thing that's behind the thing to get I do that to watch the Pats sometimes. But all right.
Yeah, it's incredible the ingenuity that goes into that too. It's like there's like 1 in 5 New York City stations has like an elevator that works, and yet somehow they found a way to make like the "Come Play My Lord" ad follow your mouse.
That's right.
As you click around the site. Really inspiring stuff.
All right, so give me a sense, like, as of today, there's nobody working at Deadspin anymore. Just give me a sense, a little bit of like, what was the relationship? Like, did you guys all go into the same office? I'm just curious about the relationship between all the workers there.
Yeah, everyone that was in New York was in the office, and we work on there's a floor that has all of editorial on it and video production in the podcast studio. And then there's a floor that's like mostly sales, and then it was just us. And Jalopnik, the transportation website, was down there, and then they moved them up. And so we were just kind of hanging out down there, which is a weird feeling, like being in this sort of deserted corner of the office. And as this was all sort of coming down, our acting editor-in-chief, after Megan left, was Barry Pacheski. On Monday, we got this edict about the stick to sports stuff. On Tuesday, we were putting blogs up, but we made a point of not, some of them were not related to sports. Some of them were like sort of silly, like Dom Cosentino, who's our NFL guy, wrote about a video of a bear kind of like wandering around a motel in Tennessee, but like gave the bear a scouting report and was like low center of gravity, not great tape, like lacks burst, which is all like
so arguably a sports.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
And that was the sort of thing where like, that's been a gag at sports websites for a long time, because it's you put a bunch of people together in a Slack channel or in an office, and that's what they're sending each other to sort of crack each other up. And I did stuff at SB Nation. I was doing stuff about like a llama. They call it pronking, but where they basically kind of pogo across a meadow, and someone had made a vine of it doing that to Party Up by DMX. And like, I asked if that was sports, and all my editors were like, hell yeah, that's sports, man. Look at what he's doing. And so he could do a post on it. in this case, though, so we did all that. The posts were there on the webpage. Someone must have shown Spanfeller the webpage. I don't think we accounted for that. We just sort of assumed we would continue to not read it. Whatever it was, he blew his stack, fired Barry. Am I allowed to use the F word here?
Absolutely.
He told him to, the way he fired him was said, "You're fired, get the fuck out," that's editorial, like sort of a managerial patois, but we were able to figure out that what he meant by that was "you're fired." And then Barry left. And at that point, we were down 2 editors in chief over a period of 3 months. Barry was the longest tenured guy there. He was the first blog on the site every morning and had been for 10 years. And really was, in terms of like what Deadspin was, I mean, he was the ideal of that. I mean, just in terms of always having a sort of an angle on things. He never, he was strictly about writing about sports, but like he got up earlier than everybody else and he wrote better than everybody else. I mean, it was really just like he was a champ and in that field. And he had a lot of respect. And I think once he was gone, a lot of the other, longer tenured people were starting to, these were people that had worked with him for 8 years or 9 years and that cared about him a lot as a person, but that also sort of realized at this point that this just is going to continue to go on this way as long as we're, under this pressure. And, over the course of that day of Tuesday, everybody sort of began to realize, where we stood and what was happening. Enough people were leaving. It was rumored, and I don't know that this is true or not, but that there would be some sort of punitive hiring freeze. And at this point, we had, one editor who's she had previously arranged so that today was going to be her last day in the office. This was before any of this had happened. She's just leaving to work on other stuff. We had video people leave. We had our social person leave. They weren't hiring anyone to replace them. And so there was just this sense of either, you just hang on and watch it go away, or, we would leave together. And then once it became clear that no one really wanted to have to deal with this stuff indefinitely, it was, at that point, that was over the course of a couple of meetings in different offices, with remote people on the phone or on life size, which is the message, like a meeting technology thing. I'm sure it's very good. I never actually figured out how to use it. But all of that was, that was as bad as I felt in a work capacity, ever. Like where I've been, laid off before, it was Vice pulled the plug on Vice Sports. SB Nation, I wasn't a fit with where they were going, and that was that. And that all sucked and was really painful, obviously, and really worrying. But it was never anything like this, where it was just a question of how long are you going to be able to hang on and watch this happen. And then as more people left, it was just clear that there was nothing really to even go back to.
Well, it's obviously a huge loss to the readers of Deadspin, and I think people should understand it's a loss even if you didn't read the site. Because this is indicative of a much larger problem that we're having, and on top of the fact that you have a lot of people out there who have lost their job and all the sort of like the misery that entails for these people, it's indicative of a larger problem. And I know too that you also did a podcast there, the Deadcast. Yeah. And I will tell you right now, I mean, I imagine you're going to have opportunities to that maybe somebody else will pick it up. But if you want to talk about doing it without a boss, give me a call. We can talk about it.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you, and thanks for having me on.
David, thanks so much, and I appreciate it. Folks can follow David Roth. What's your Twitter handle?
It is @David_J_Roth. That was just in case David Lee Roth ever got on there, I wanted to make sure that I had my brand secure.
Super smart to do the double underscore.
Yeah, savvy.
Nobody else.
Yeah,
would
that's
ever
it.
do.
People love typing them. I didn't make the rules, man.
All right, David, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
And,
thank you, dude. I appreciate it.
Hang in
yep,
there.
have a good one.
Boy, I'll tell you something. I just watched that happen, and it reminded me of the nightmare that we would go through at Air America every like 9 months. And but good for everybody there, at least for sort of deciding to jump off and leave that dude just
Very awesome.
sitting in his empty office, proud of himself.
I mean, it still breaks my heart to think about it because this was my career up until I started working here pretty much. And I don't think I'm going to be going back because it's a shit show.
I honestly think that there's, I mean, we say this all the time, but I mean, like, you see a guy like Tom Steyer who's now spent, what's he up to? Like $60 million? Is the dude even going to get on the debate stage?
He is the next one.
He is?
Yeah.
And he had, 3 things he said last time? And for the life of me, you could pay me that $60 million and I would not be able to tell you what they were beyond him saying, like, we tried to get impeachment, and then everything else is just the complete Melba toast.
He also said Bernie's right.
I agree. We just need to
ironic.
be smart about it. That's his message.
But maybe it's not Tom Steyer, but the idea like that we have these, there are people out there, and I can't imagine. I have no idea what the Deadspin, sort of like annual operating budget is. But if it was more than like $5 million, I'd be shocked. And I imagine it was less, but I don't know. I have no idea about these things. I know that at Air America, when we were in bankruptcy, we had our lowest burn rate, and that was like maybe it was $3 million a year. And we had a nice big full floor office on 6th Avenue. And, we were doing a 15, 16 hours a day of programming, fully staffed. And we had a website that was, the idea of this being a co-op, like just somebody stepping in and just saying, like, even as a loan, like if it's $5 million, I'll loan you the money. And by year 2, the revenue is coming in that can keep the thing alive and throw off, 10, 20% profit. That goes to your VIG and to paying back the principal.
Yeah, but when you go to an event in Iowa, some people still have to introduce you as the next president of the United States. And that feels cool.
I just don't get it.
So what do I want to spend my $5 million so that some like snarky asshole like
Steyer.
talks about Pat's games and says my taxes should go up? Or maybe I could run for president and enjoy myself.
But the thing is, Tom Steyer could it could be one of those situations like, you like sometimes when I come back from Vegas, I get $100 bills.
Give me money, Tom.
And there's been one occasion where I had a $100 bill in like a pair of pants.
Right.
Or like in a sport jacket that I never wear. And I didn't find it for like 2 years later.
Oh, you must have been so stoked.
I was actually pretty stoked. I guess that cuts against what I was going to say. Like, that's like $5 million. Tom Steyer is just like, oh, did I leave that there? You know what? I don't have time to get back. I'll just get it the next time I'm over your
Tom
house.
Steyer's
And I'll
probably
see you in a
stoked.
couple
He's
of
like, I could scam. You know how many email addresses I could scam with a fake civic campaign with the $5 million I founded? Or I could flip it into Geo Group. 5 million
annoying.
works so well.
So annoying to see this happening. But I think, honestly, like, at one point, and, waiting for a billionaire to do this is just not worth it.
No.
I think we need to have statutes where, and I don't know if that law, and I can't remember for the life of me who it is I was talking to, who I think it was a congressman, and maybe it was on Ring of Fire, who said like there is a statute on the books, or the one that was voting on, to do that with businesses that were owned by family-owned businesses. When they sell them, there would be a government bridge loan that would allow the employees to buy it. There should be statutes. And I almost think that like, I don't know how you would frame it in such a way. Like, obviously you can't force Spanfeller to sell this, but I think there should be an option that's out there so that these guys at Deadspin, when they're getting around the office, can say like, maybe we should just do a 327I, which is like where you get the government loan. Like, we can all do
that's
this.
That's what Labour is putting forward in the UK. That's what
awesome.
Labour has the most extensive, and Bernie has a similar one, but the Labour's is really ambitious. That, the government will step in for mid-sized to small loans to create that possibility.
Yeah. And that to me, whether it's like Uber style stuff, like everything web-based, it seems to me, is, unless you're talking about sort of like a web-based major retail type of thing, whatever it is. I don't know what the constrictions are on this. But the fact is that like I am always very suspicious of like, when not to single them out, but when Gimlet was bought for $230 million by Spotify or whatever it was.
Gimlet was how much the acquisition was?
That supposedly was. I'm like,
that is insane.
I don't know how the hell that's happening.
What we're gonna do is these podcasts are gonna become
more than 200
screenplays.
Yeah, like I don't know. I was always like, really? Are they gonna get that money back?
First, it's a podcast.
I'm gonna sell Literary Hangover for $15 million.
And listen, I've been approached by people who say like, this is, people who had, money or access to private equity money who come in and say this. And I'm like, I can't wrap my head around how anybody's going to make that money back. And I'm like, I don't want to like wake up in the morning and have to pretend that like, oh yeah, we're just days away from that $100 million revenue, and don't worry about a thing. Just you want to play some ping pong in the
I do think
hockey room?
Fictitious.
Commissary.
Our parody of the startup podcast would be funny.
Yeah,
to do
that was really. Oh, when we were working on that, it's like, so how do I do a pump and dump, like with the NPR voice? And you're telling me you can have 30,000 clicks extra that aren't real?
We are. Exactly? I don't know what they call it, MCM or something. We're under the auspices of the Young Turks. They do some of the optimizing for our YouTube channel, and I got offers to leave. We pay them a percentage of what we make, and I got offers to leave like by this company from Canada. I can't remember what it was called, like Booming Media or something like that. And the guy would write, and he goes like, "We have a new platform that will promote you across thing." And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think so. And then the next week, a different rep from the same place would be like, "Hey, I'm Stefan, from Boomer Media, and we're prepared to give you $1,000 signing bonus." And then I'm like, is this like some type of phishing thing? And then it got up to like $5 or $10 grand. And I'm like,
just give me your personal information and we'll get this deal going.
But it turns out it wasn't. And I was like, I don't understand how they're doing this. Like, how do you make money by paying money to people to not give you, like, I didn't see what the business plan was. And then I was talking to one of these guys. They're like, oh, what they're trying to do is show bigger fish that they have this revenue. And I'm like, but they're paying me to just have my revenue on their books, even though they're not getting anything from it. And they're like, yeah, no, they don't check on how much it costs to get that revenue. Everybody assumes they can cut costs. That's nuts in my mind, but.
Well, maybe someday, with the help of President Bernie, we here at Majority Report will make you an offer you can't refuse.
Yes, well,
we'll do some kind of leveraged.
Damn that 231 I-7 idea.
No.
All right, folks. Just a reminder.
Dead hands.
We'll be coming for TMBS too. I
was just going to say, I think obviously we need to cap it at a certain size. Let's not be ridiculous here.
My show's already a workaround co-op. Just saying.
We'll spread that. We'll spread that around too a little bit.
We'll see. We'll see what workaround really means.
All right, folks. Speaking of which, you can be well, I guess we haven't quite figured out that part of the model yet, but you can be a member of the Majority Report, and you could do so and support this program by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. Jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you get the show commercial free. You get it. You get extended versions of the show as well, and you have. Still, obviously, you can search the member archive on our app. I mean, all sorts of benefits. Also, don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Reminder, we've had a lot of people who are taking us up on the offer. If you don't have the financial resources to become a member, but you want access to the fun half of the show, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Wait, but I am... over the next week or so, depending on my schedule with my kids, we will get back to those, and we will hook you up by hook or crook, as it were. Meanwhile, this episode is brought to you by Blinkist. The Blinkist app takes the key takeaways from thousands of best-selling nonfiction books and condenses them down to just 15 minutes for you to read or listen to. 10 million people are using Blinkist right now. Make it 10 million one. Let them know you're listening to the show. It has a massive and growing library from self-help and business to health and history books. Right now, you can get 25% off your first year at Blinkist at Blinkist.com/majority. That's Blinkist, Blinkist.com/majority. Michael, today is Friday. That means that Tuesday happened. What happened on Tuesday?
What happened on Tuesday? Shama Sawant, Krystal Ball, and Harvey J.K. We released the Slavoj Žižek conversation for patrons, which was fantastic. I recommend people get an early peek at that, as well as the Adolph Reed interview. This coming Tuesday, we are in fact playing that Adolph Reed interview, and Abby Martin's making her debut on the show to talk about Gaza and why Trump is expanding empire, contrary to the mythology of isolationism. Patreon.com/TMBS. Michael Brooks Show on YouTube.
Jamie.
This week on the Antifada, we had on the very funny podcast hosts from Minion Death Cult, wherein we talk about Halloween, some of our fun Mischief Night stories, and we read some hilarious boomer and other kinds of posts from the internet. We got some Christians who are mad about Halloween. We commemorated last year's Antifa Super Soldier Revolution. If you guys remember that, that was 1 year ago. We recalled InfoWars attacks on me earlier this year, and we closed out with some Tim Pool Joker posting. Also, out today for our patrons, it's part 2 of History as a Weapon on Suburbia with Matt Chrisman and Sean KB. Those guys really know their stuff. They talk about all kinds of, I'm not even going to read this. Just listen to it. It's great. You're going to love it. That's all. Patreon.com/theantifada.
Now, is All Mischief's Night, is that when you grow up, was that the same night as Halloween, or is that a different?
The night before.
It's the night before.
Yeah, they also call it Devil's Night in some places.
Yeah, in Worcester, same night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's weird.
I mean, you could get up to mischief on Halloween as well. Andy had a very on-brand story about how he would cruise around his neighborhood, and if there was a house with too many pumpkins, he would take some of those pumpkins and redistribute them to the houses with no pumpkins.
Oh, that was nice. We would just throw eggs at people.
It's Pumpkinhood.
That was it. We just threw eggs. Rode bikes, threw eggs, tried to get away from the bigger kids who would throw eggs at us.
Oh, no, the big kids are coming. Let's throw it at the old lady's house and then go home for matzo ball soup.
On Literary Hangover, I did an episode
I really
on the
that up.
don't talk over my plug. On the material and political history of the Salem witch trials of 1692. So check that out, folks.
See you.
Plugs are so short too.
See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder. I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
Psych. Fuck them.
Almost says what? Almost says what?
Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
See Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Sam Seder on the fun half. Oh, this is pretty awesome. Do we have this clip of those elderly folks in? So there's been ongoing protests in Chile, and I mean just enormous numbers of people protesting out of what started with attacks on WhatsApp?
WhatsApp's Lebanon. It was a fare hike on the subway. And then what really just one little disgusting twist. The initial response of the president was, if you can't afford the increase, you should ride during non-peak hours. So that was just leave home.
Don't worry about your job.
Yeah.
Let them eat cake.
And this basically triggered a massive protest. Like 1 out of every 18 or 17 Chileans were on the streets. I think it was last weekend. And the protests have been ongoing, and they're protesting austerity. This is, you remember, I don't know if you remember, but in 1973, September 11th, the Salvador Allende was ousted in a coup that was significantly, if not largely, if not totally, enabled by the CIA. Henry Kissinger was very excited to help out. I think it was the Kissinger 12 or 13. I don't know. This is going back to my undergrad days. And there was, significant U.S. corporate interests that were afraid of being nationalized, coup, and I think they brought down a lot of those Chicago University guys. Milton Friedman went down there. They instituted basically austerity regimes that have been ongoing, more or less ebbing and flowing over the years.
Basically locking in capital power constitutionally.
And so let's start with here is a Chilean protester disabling a surveillance camera right here, just to give you a sense of like how bold people are getting, right? And look at that.
Hell yeah. You got to watch it till the end, too.
Is it? I can't tell if that's a woman or a man. I think it's a woman. And she's climbing out on, and this stuff is, this is high. I mean, that is like.
She's going to do a little trust fall now.
Whoa. Is that right? Holy cow.
Wow.
Wow. That's
Look at everyone celebrate spontaneously.
Oh my gosh. That's one of the most amazing things I've ever done. She disables this surveillance camera, and then instead, she can't climb down, and they just all agree to catch her, and she's dropping. I mean, it's hard to tell, but it feels like she's dropping at least 20 feet. Right? I mean, at least this
Has
thing
to
is.
be at least 20 feet.
That camera looks
25.
like it's 25 feet up in the air, and I'm saying dropping 20 feet into the hands of like people who are, maybe 5 feet tall, 6 feet tall, and they catch her. And it, and then in just another moment,
solidarity.
You see these folks who look to be of the age of who were probably in their 20s or so back during Allende's time, come out of their homes to cheer on the protesters who are younger. I mean, these people, I don't know how old they are, but I'm back of the envelope doing this. But check this out. That's very sweet.
It's incredible. I think that, one of the chants is that neoliberalism was born here and it's going to die here.
Mm-hmm.
And, but it's so important to look at that. I always think of Quinn Slobodian's book with this because
globalist.
The idea that liberalizing the economy was some type of like freedom enhancing deregulatory move when in fact it's highly bureaucratic, highly regimented. And you had this, Chile, this incredible fusion where all of these freedom lovers like Milton Friedman and James Buchanan flew there and taught them how to privatize their social security system and create the kind of healthcare system that is, similar to what we have. And while Pinochet was having people's stomachs cut open and thrown out of helicopters, that was the synthesis.
You can go back to August of 29, 2018 to hear that interview with Quinn Slobodian, Globalist, the End of Empire and the Birth of Neoliberalism.
Like, I want to know, sorry.
Go ahead.
I want to know what it's going to take for all of these amazing movements that are popping off all over the world, Chile, Ecuador, Haiti, Lebanon, elsewhere, to kind of link together in some sort of socialist international and recognize that they have a common enemy and a common problem, and it's capitalism. Like, do we need an app? Like, what should we do?
That's what I was going to say. I think we need to wait for a billionaire to develop an app that will. Wouldn't
it be awesome if Steyer created an email listserv just to sucker people? Like, he was just like, I know how to exploit these DSA idiot kids. We need a global communist revolution. Put in your email.
I think what we need is a billionaire to develop an app that will connect all of these disparate movements, take their energy and use it to create a cryptocurrency that they will control. And
what were you going to say?
I think
protest coin.
The whole thing about the repetition of the neoliberalism was born here and it's going to die here is a growing recognition that this is a global phenomenon.
Right.
And it is like,
because I don't know that it actually started there.
It didn't.
At least that was like the first testing ground.
It was the first. You could say it was the first most raw neoliberal. Like, they had their way there fully. Right. The earliest.
Yeah,
That is
and
true.
it very clearly links the violence of neoliberalism with the violence of the Pinochet government and the coup, which is important because people often think of neoliberalism as this like passive milquetoast thing, and it's not.
It's force plus finance.
Katie Hill resigned, and this is, we haven't spent too much time on this. I mean, there's a quality of this that is, and my understanding is that every time you get a wave of change in the House, where you get about, you bring in tens upon tens of new Congress people, there's inevitably a couple of scandals. And Katie Hill ran in a purple district in California. She won. She apparently was in the midst of a divorce. There was an allegation that she had an affair, or not an affair, a sexual relationship with a member of her congressional staff. Now that is
get it, girl.
That is against House rules for obvious reasons. She denied that allegation. However, she did admit to having a relationship with a campaign staffer. Now that is not against the House rules. It can come up in the context of an ethics investigation and could lead to ethics censure, whatnot. But what seems to have happened was that her estranged husband basically was shopping around a lot of pictures that were taken of her that she was unaware of, and that there were other questions that I think we don't know what the reality is behind it. But the bottom line is she decided to resign, and my understanding is that nothing she actually did was in any way worse, or in some respects even comparable to what goes on every day in Congress. But usually it's men who are engaging in, relationships with campaign staffers, or male candidates, I should say, or congressmen, with campaign staffers or people in their office, or, some type of, I don't know. I mean, is really polyamory really that scandalous anymore? But I mean, those type of situations. And she makes that point in her farewell speech. I mean, it was a pretty good one. She went through, she took responsibility for what happened, to the extent that anything happened. She apologized to all of the stakeholders who helped her campaign, who she was representing, who maybe looked up to her. And then she made this point, which I think is an important point to make, is at one point we're going to have to reckon with the fact that, like, there is no doubt that that there is some double standards here. Now, I know that there were pictures of Anthony Weiner that ended up causing his resignation. But let's remember that he was sending his own, I don't know if they were full-on, dick pics, but maybe they were. I didn't really dive too deep into those. Didn't have that much interest. But these were actions that he was taking that, were
pretty stupid.
Were stupid, and they were on, he was doing this. As far as we know, everyone involved in this situation were consenting adults. And she wasn't cheating on her husband. This was apparently part of the arrangement that they had. And to the extent that, when they were married. And she didn't authorize the release of these pictures. She didn't even know in certain circumstances, apparently, that they were even taken. And so I don't know that it's an apples to apples comparison, but here she is on the floor of the House announcing her resignation.
To drive clicks and expand their audience by distributing intimate photos of me taken without my knowledge, let alone my consent, for the sexual entertainment of millions. I'm leaving because of a misogynistic culture that gleefully consumed my naked pictures, capitalized on my sexuality, and enabled my abusive ex to continue that abuse, this time with the entire country watching. I am leaving because of the thousands of vile, threatening emails, calls, and texts that made me fear for my life and the lives of the people that I care about. Today is the first time I've left my apartment since the photos, taken without my consent, were released, and I'm scared. I'm leaving because for the sake of my community, my staff, my family, and myself, I can't allow this to continue. Because I've been told that people were angry when I stood strong after the first article was posted, and that they had hundreds more photos and text messages that they would release bit by bit until they broke me down to nothing, while they used my faults and my past to distract from the things that matter most. I'm leaving because there is only one investigation that deserves the attention of this country, and that's the one that we voted on today. Today, I ask you all to stand with me and commit to creating a future where this no longer happens to women and girls. Yes, I'm stepping down, but I refuse to let this experience scare off other women who dare to take risks, who dare to step into this light, who dare to be powerful. It might feel like they won in the short term, but they can't in the long term. We cannot let them. The way to overcome this setback is for women to keep showing up, to keep running for office, to keep stepping up as leaders, because the more we show up, the less power they have. I'm leaving, but we have men who have been credibly accused of intentional acts of sexual violence and remain in boardrooms, on the Supreme Court, in this very body, and worst of all, in the Oval Office.
There you go.
Wow.
That's accurate.
Isn't that a crime? Revenge porn and blackmail?
Well, I think yes. I mean, I think I think she's going to at the very least be able to get to sue, and I think in California it's also a criminal violation, and I think the ex-husband is going to have some legal difficulties going forward. Would be my guess, but nevertheless, there is. Our society is, look, think of the people in Congress right now, Mark Sanford, who just basically went on a vacation without telling anybody because he wanted to cheat on his wife. David Vitter, who was found to be a diaper, guy who liked diaper play with his prostitutes.
Michael just yelled from the other room.
Well,
he's horrified.
There have been men who have been able to stay within their positions. Obviously, the president. There are
a former president.
There are 40 some odd women who have made credible claims that the sitting president of the United States sexually assaulted them, which of course is far worse than taking a naked picture where you're brushing the hair of your girlfriend. He is still
Thanks
in
for
office.
the flight, Jeffrey, too, by the way.
You shouldn't sleep with anyone who works for you, but there's an easy solution to that, and that's that all Congress people should get paid poly leave to go off and find people who don't work for them.
Well, she wasn't working for anybody. I mean, she was not, as far as we know, she was not having sex with anybody who worked for her in Congress.
Oh, okay, I thought
it was campaign staffer, but not in Congress.
Well, same diff. She's a workaholic.
Well, but I'm saying prior to her being a congresswoman.
Yeah, it's still a bad look.
It's not something that I think people should do, but I would imagine in the context of a campaign that happens quite often. And
I don't care as long as there's no diaper play. You can have sex with your staffer, whatever.
I honestly think,
just don't be disgusting.
I honestly think that in the context of like a campaign, if the two people are sort of like similar age in the context of an endeavor that is sort of a limited run type of thing, it's
You're
not
writing a
as much
screenplay
of
in
a
your
problem.
head right now.
Like in the passion of the trail, and the shared drive of the cause.
I'm leaving myself some wiggle room for my run against Schumer.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
That's
It's
exactly what you're doing. I know what you're doing.
I'm just.
Don't you hate Chuck so much?
Yes.
Cynthia Goldbaum.
What? Why do you have to why do you have to cap it with that? It's just
funny.
like it's
because it's sort of like at this point it's kind of the intentionally bad thing that adds a certain charm to it.
We just got an IM. I'm not taking any calls today, folks. We're just doing IMs. And Steph from Chicago says, "Easy on the kink shaming, Michael. First they came for the diaper players."
Okay, and then they can come for all the other disgusting ones. I don't care.
Sam's Tinder profile. Famous last words, folks. Sam's Tinder profile. Hey, girl, swipe right for some company for a fire dude chat.
What?
I don't get it.
It might be time to retire that one.
Or just step it up.
Or step it up.
Come on, we can do better.
Do you hate Chuck Schumer?
Right, of course.
Yeah, on the other hand, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, so keep them coming in, folks.
That's true. That's true.
Hey, man, you got to know from Maine.
Robin Reno. Dave Rubin's stupidity is dangerous. I hunt in Northern California and cross PG&E equipment all the time. Most of these small substations around here have so much debris accumulated this time of year that it looks less like a fire hazard than it does a family of giants is putting kindling piles around the countryside. But you can't throw money at that, regardless of the fact the Forest Service is regularly doing 10 times the work daily and often within yards of PG&E equipment. But you can't. But you can be sure there are no white people in North Carolina, Northern California who know how to rake. Also, please read the Wall Street Journal piece from January 13th, Not Opinion, where they say PG&E and not the libs are responsible for 1,500 fires in the 4 previous years. 4 years. Think about that. Actually, the Journal has savaged them all year. Please share with Dave. You know, Dave and I don't talk.
Please.
Not only can
you're not. Wait, you're really not in a text thread? Were you not in a group text with Dave Rubin?
Sam infiltrates the IDW
that
group
would be
chat.
amazing. It's like, hey guys.
Well,
all of a sudden your thoughts.
It's funny you say infiltrate because my understanding is there are some people who are, I wouldn't say necessarily involved with this show, but are in the universe of this show, who apparently are members of Dave Rubin's new coffee clutch or whatever it is, that little group thing he has.
Well, they're media consumers.
They're media consumers.
Oh man, they're interested in ideas. This is like
they're sleeper cells. Right. They're sleeper cells. So.
I need to do that.
Yep. Mean Kitty, Thanksgiving is coming. It's time for a guest spot with Janine Garofalo. Oh, that's true. We should bring that back. How are you going to deal with? Yeah, maybe I'll be in touch with her. Jalaya, hey, saw you on Chris Hayes the other day. Your voice always sounds different on the other shows. It's almost like you're making your voice deeper. I think you're pretty manly just the way you are. Thank you. Are you saying that my voice is deeper here or on the other shows?
Oh, he's saying you get deeper for Hayes.
Oh, on the other, because you know what I think it is because here I get excited. And when I do, I have a bad habit of my register going up. So when I'm on the other shows, I'm calm. A squared. Sam, Miss Digby, but we'll catch up. What do you make of the Republican stance on the vote yesterday? Survival strategy or lemmings? We spent time talking about that. I think you will enjoy the conversation with Digby. Chris from Taiwan. Watching Sam get called uninformed and not a journalist by some random drunk guy who was sputtering sentences, fragments about Piven and Cloward while shaking a mimosa at Sam's face was one of the highlights of my time as a Majority Report fan. More of that, please.
That was probably the best segment that this show's had
that
for
was
years.
Completely unplanned. I just saw the dude walk in and he was doing one of these like he was walking. Like I hadn't seen somebody walk that way in a long time. And maybe I just, didn't pay attention, but he was just like walking
Dude,
around and I just
when
couldn't
you
help
said that you had an interaction that concluded with you saying, I think we just have to agree to disagree.
I had said that 2 days earlier,
I
right?
know,
Like
I
the day
remember
right.
that. And I was like, I definitely need to meet this guy.
Have you read the Cloward-Piven thesis?
Excuse me?
Have you read Cloward-Piven?
I have not read Cloward-Piven.
Okay, well, then you're not a journalist.
Wow, I'm sorry I missed that.
Yeah,
Gotta go
That
back
guy
and
was
watch.
awesome.
that was something.
There's actually a lot the left
That
could
was
learn from
something.
that.
I mean, like, I wouldn't say that things got like. I felt like
That's
the
how
night,
you critique
the
each
night
other's healthcare plans.
2 nights before, I think, is when I met the dude, and I think we were probably about 7 minutes away from it getting like close to being like a little bit physical. Like you know, because I've been down that road before, and there's a point where it's like we're both aware, like he's aware I'm condescending to him, and you know, I'm signaling to him like, yeah, also like I'm not physically intimidated by you, where he did sort of like one of these clocks towards me, and I did like, you know, we're gonna have to agree to disagree, and I did the old like, look, I'm putting my hand on your shoulder because I'm not afraid of touching you.
Wow. Over the Cloward-Piven strategy. What was
this
the
was
primary
before the
disagreement?
Cloward-Piven. No, the prior disagreement was, so they have these like, the conference has these, you know, like parties, like cocktail parties, where, you know, I go there because I'm trying to find lawyers who like I'm going to interview. And
purely professional.
I mean, it's not where I would go to socialize. Let's put it that way. And this guy comes by, and I can't remember if he was a vendor. He had some like business that he was marketing to lawyers. So he's going out and trying to meet people. And I'm there, and I'm dressed, and he comes up to me, and
You're
he's
dressed. That's
well, I'm like wearing like a sport coat, which I don't normally do.
I was actually clothed. I usually walk around Vegas in my briefs.
Exactly. And so he came up and he's like, "Hey, you know, I do. We do financing, or we do intake for."
That's exactly what the guy sounded like.
And I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting, you know, because I'm interested in finding out how it works." And he says, "Are you an attorney?" And I'm like, "No, actually, I'm here interviewing other attorneys." And usually, that's when these people like will disengage a little bit because they've got to go meet other people who can actually buy their product. That's what they're sort of ostensibly there for. He did not. And he's like, "Oh, politics? I like talking about politics." And I'm like, "Oh, all right, great." And he goes, "So what do you know?" And I can't. It was sort of innocuous where it went in, like, "What do you think of the race?" or something, or "Who do you like?" And you know, and I said, "Well, I'm not a fan of like Buttigieg or Biden and at all." And and I said, "You know, I don't know how we got on Medicare for all." And I said, like, you know, I tend to lean towards Bernie and, you know, maybe Warren to some extent, and, you know, Medicare for all. And he's like, "Oh, well, yeah, that doesn't work anywhere." And he's like, "I've lived in 5 different countries and 23 different states," and or something like that. And I was like, "It doesn't work anywhere."
In which states do they have Medicare for all?
Well, look, don't get, you know, look, you throw around what states, but my grandmother is from Canada, and she came down here for surgery because there was a 7-month wait for her to get the surgery. And I said, "Well, you know, elective surgeries in these countries that have single payer, you may not get them as quick as you might in this country." But in this country, you may not get them at all. And in some instances, you may not get stuff that's not elective at all because you have no health care. And I'm like, look, I don't know if maybe your grandmother has the means to do, "Oh, we're very wealthy." Like, he literally said, like, "We're really, really wealthy." Like, to the point, like, where like in a way that I was struck like, oh, this is slightly different conversation where like you're going to tell me you know what you're talking about because you're that much richer. And I said, well, okay, that's my point. You may define healthcare, good healthcare, as being, you know, where do princes go when they want to get the best cancer treatment. But I define it as the general population, how many people are able to get health care. And we have a good measure for that. That's called health outcomes. And our health outcomes in this country are lower than they are in Canada. And in fact, about a dozen other places. And he said, look, you have no idea what you're talking about. Okay, I'm wealthy. He said something like that. And that was when I was just like, we just agree to disagree. And he's like, no, your definition's wrong. And I'm like, no, I don't think it is. But okay, like I say, good luck to you. And he's like, yeah, good luck to you. And that's sort of how I walked away from him.
Wow.
The big difference between me and Sam here is I would have said, and you should become a patron of my show.
Right.
Maybe you would know more.
Before we disagree, yeah.
Pat you on the shoulder and say, but you know, you could learn some perspective on this by going to patreon.com/TMBS.
You can get on our Slack channel. You can get on our Discord. And tell me
there'll
I'm
be a lot of
jerk
different viewpoints on there for you.
Oh, that's a very good show. Well, I guess the anti-Medicare for All forces have just found themselves a new champion, and his name is Mimosa Man.
Yeah, and then I didn't know any of the
Bromosa.
The Cliven, the Cliven Proward, all that stuff. I didn't really. That
what
didn't
was
quite
he saying?
come.
Because I actually know quite a bit about that. We talked about it on an early episode of the Intifada.
Well, he was basically saying that their formula of he was talking about in the context, I'm convinced, of Glenn Beck. Like that part did not come out. Well, Glenn Beck did a deep dive into Frances Priven. And you know her plans, like what they're going to take over everything, and this is like this sort of
they're going to a bunch of people will sign up into welfare, and it will gradually replace capitalism.
Yeah.
As Alexander Coburn had this line, he said about Glenn. He said, "I kind of like Glenn Beck. Like at last, a little bit of respect."
Right, exactly.
Which was back in
like someone
the day
who thinks
when
this is actually possible.
Right, this is back in the utter left irrelevance.
It did seem possible. It goes back to the welfare rights movement of the 60s and 70s, and part of the plan was to sign everybody up who could possibly qualify for benefits, and on a very immediate level, that would help people, and also like if the system could not support a decent life for everyone, then the system would need to change. That was the basic ethos behind it.
Little did they know that what they would do is just the system would just cut, and then it would just walk away and talk about something else that's going on.
Just slash it.
Exactly.
But slowly and gradually, if we have enough people not working, sucking up welfare benefits,
I mean,
we
it's
can
so
gradually
hard to
degrade
get
the white
welfare
race.
now that absolutely wouldn't even work at this point in time.
Well, so A Square asked us about how are Republicans reacting in the House to the impeachment vote yesterday. That, again, fourth time in history when the House has voted to begin an official impeachment inquiry. Some Republicans really don't want to talk about it, apparently. Who is this reporter? Do we know?
It's Stephanie Kennedy, it looks like.
Well, Stephanie Kennedy is the one who is posting it. But who is the...
it's from Move On.
Okay, so Move On apparently wanted to ask Representative Don Young from Alaska what his perspective is. Now, remember, the reason why you might put a little pressure on Don Young, Lisa Murkowski is one of those Republicans she's not up for re-election, but she's one who has to sort of tiptoe around this too. And so maybe this is the idea with Don Young. Maybe there are others that they've approached, I imagine. But Don Young is also, he's eccentric. And here's how he avoided this question in the halls of Congress as he raced to get on the member elevator. That is that's their big escape hatch. Get to the member elevator.
It's like safe.
I wish I had a member elevator. It's awesome for like every moment in life.
Here we go.
Zach will be able to talk to you. Is that enough pay? action to happen.
And so the guy from Move On's asking him, is it okay for foreign governments to interfere in our election? I mean, I think we can all agree that we should not be interfering in other people's elections. Certainly, that's a lot of what we talk about in the show, and vice versa. And you really shouldn't solicit a foreign government and extort out of them or bribe them to pretend that you're investigating somebody.
It's a little thing we believe in called reciprocity. That's our favorite word.
I scratch your back,
word.
You scratch my back. Not quid pro quo. Not this for that. That for that. And that way I get around the law. Go ahead.
Interfere in our election. Totally up for talking to you guys. Is that an acceptable thing to have happen? Congressman, it's a simple yes or no question. It's just the best way to do these is it okay? Is we talk to our press secretary. There you go.
There you go. The classic.
That was pretty cool.
This is the best part,
congressional
though.
headbutt on the camera.
Hits the button again.
Damn it! Damn it! I can only do one headbutt per session.
He's the best person to talk to about this. And
I think the guy's Warby Park.
Get you something back. Just curious, yes or no question. Do you think it's okay for the president to pressure foreign
thank God.
to interfere in our
Hipster cop.
elections? I think
Yeah,
the best
that
thing to
guy.
do
I
is talk
remember
to our
that
press
dude.
secretary. Yes or no? Okay to pressure foreign governments to interfere in our elections? Is that an okay thing to do? Congressman?
There you go. You know that Move On guy turned around and looked at the cameraman like, I hope the camera was running when he headbutted you. That was pretty good. That is reminiscent of our favorite relationship between a politician and a camera. I don't know if you remember Don Shooter, representative from Yuma, Washington, confronted Arizona, sorry, confronted about claims of some type of sexual harassment at the state capitol. Here is the dance that Don Shooter did.
I want to ask you to respond to all the women that have made accusations.
There is a ongoing investigation. Can't comment.
Well, you've got to comment about what the women are saying about you.
No, Dennis, I don't have to. There's an ongoing investigation.
Okay, do you think this is a distraction from the legislative session?
There's an ongoing investigation. I will have no comment. There's an ongoing investigation. I will have no comment. Any confusion?
No, there's no confusion.
At a certain point, you are the one that's harassing people.
I'm not harassing
you.
You
are harassing me.
I
feel harassed. I feel harassed.
Sir.
Yeah, well, I feel harassed in public.
But you're an elected official. You should be answering these kinds of questions. You've been accused of some serious...
Here we go. Spin around.
What are you doing?
What are you doing?
How did you do that?
Seemed like the right thing to do.
Boom. There you go.
Some real high school dickhead American Vandal energy right there.
Back in the day. So Don Young. Now,
Never
when you're
forget.
in Congress, you don't do the full loop around. You just do the headbutt.
It's got to do a headbutt. Yeah, it's customary.
They teach you at orientation.
That's right. New members, don't forget, those days of dancing around the camera are over. Now it's just a headbutt. This is a little, I don't know how to react to this, frankly. Years ago, I started a very popular blog that was called Your Indiegogo Sucks. And when I said, I should really move on to something else, and I saw Your Kickstarter Sucks, I was like, fine. They can do that. But I'm getting a little bit, I'm losing a little patience with these guys now. They have a podcast. It's Your Kickstarter Sucks, the podcast. And Chris James, this guy who is a serial harasser of mine, speaking of harassment, man, it's completely inappropriate, has brought this show to a complete standstill because apparently He has nothing better to do. I mean, I went on Block Party, and he did it to me there.
Ambushed
and
you.
It was really highly inappropriate stuff and childish in many respects. But here he is on YKS, and this thing is I don't even know how to react to this.
I had written down the Sam Seder thing at the top of the show, and that wasn't ad-libbed. So I've clearly thought that this was worth saying, that you're now a big deal. From the last time we talked to you, you have now become a big deal, right?
Yeah, like you had to go through somebody to get me on this time. Go through and I am in the room with them when they're taking the call.
Right.
And I'm sort of coaching them. I have a whiteboard. I'm telling them what to say, and I'm listening on a different line. It doesn't. As I think about it, it doesn't really make sense why I have them in place.
It's definitely more trouble for you.
So this is Chris James talking about how now he's been able to hire an assistant who he basically has in the room, to get bookings on these other shows because we talked to him on this show. And but go ahead.
I have them in place.
It's definitely more trouble for you
Costs
than
a
it's
lot
worth. Yeah.
as well. Costs a lot. I'm paying them a full $50,000 a year salary. So, yeah, it's not going. Yeah, financially, it's been an issue for sure that I do need to sort out. But yeah, no, I was on the Majority Report. So that's what you're the thing you're talking about.
I'm talking about one other show you did. Yeah, that's basically what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we did one other show. It is a big show. It has a big following. So a lot of people really more than doubled. I had 1,500 subscribers before, and it went up to 9,000 or something. So it made a huge impact on it.
I can't believe that many. It's so hard to get people to click on stuff.
Yeah,
it's
totally.
unreal that they have that kind of. And though, you know what? Actually, and it actually makes me mad. I don't like it. I'll just come out and say it. I don't like that.
Just getting mad at everything today.
I'm pissed off that you're becoming more popular.
No, okay.
I'm pissed off that it wasn't.
I don't need to hear any more of this. I don't know who this guy from your Kickstarter sucks. What's his
Jesse
name?
Farrar.
Jesse Farrar. He doesn't like it. People should go and follow him on his SoundCloud there. We'll put the link up and see how he likes it then. He doesn't like it? You're really not going to like it now, buddy.
Yeah, do your own bookings. It's not that hard.
It's unbelievable. Unbelievable, the attitude that these people had after I gave them the whole idea based upon your Indiegogo is not so great. And they just changed a couple of words.
We got to come up with nickname, like Limbaugh-style nicknames for them.
Yeah. What is it? Your Kickstarter something.
They did the really good thing where they said
your Kickstarter cucks.
Your Kickstarter
cucks.
There you go.
Nice one from
How about
Brandon.
your Cuckstarter is not so great. How's that?
You might remember Your Kickstarter Sucks. They were the ones that did that prank on conservatives where they said, I work at a restaurant and we're dropping the chicken on the floor before Trump supporters come in.
Was
that them? Oh, no.
This is the restaurant we work at. Here's the phone number. We can find it. It's on a Vimeo. But then a whole bunch of people called in saying, you think you're pretty tough doing this to Trump supporters?
Was that those guys?
The best part was that even these calls, some of the people still said, I'm not even a Trump supporter. I consider myself an independent. And I think what you're doing
is absolutely wrong.
I actually felt the need to do that same bullshit line.
Oh, my God.
Even responding to what they do is they find out somehow they voted for Trump, and they drop chicken on the floor for them specifically, pick it up. It's a really complicated workflow at that restaurant.
That's very funny. All right, let's play. We got two more clips here I want to do. So I interviewed Ken Klippenstein about this, I guess it was about a month ago on Ring of Fire Radio. You can find it on our, I think we put that clip up on our YouTube channel maybe. It was, what was the date on that? Do you know?
I think it was August 16th. Yeah.
August 16th. About work that he did in finding documents showing that the FBI was dedicating a significant amount of resources to investigating and spying on black nationalists, which of course is a huge problem in this country. I think we all we all know.
So what they did to those Indiana boys.
There's no other type of domestic terror threats that we should be watching, despite the fact that more people have died at the hands of right-wing white supremacist terrorists in this country over the past 15 years than anyone else. In terms of political movements, as it were. And here is the Chris Wray, this is the House Homeland Security meeting. Christopher Wray is the head of the FBI, director of the FBI. And here he's being questioned by, who is this, Congressman?
Cedric Richmond.
Cedric Richmond, who cites that very piece that Ken Klipstein did. And, reminder, he is a reporter for the Young Turks. It is a big deal to have independent media doing reporting and reporting that is actually having a material impact on the oversight that Congress is doing of the executive branch.
We do not open investigations into anyone on the domestic terrorism side unless we have, one, credible evidence of a federal crime, two, credible evidence of a threat of violence, and three, in furtherance of an ideology. We don't have those three things, there's no investigation. So we don't investigate ideology, rhetoric, peaceful protest, anything like that.
Well, let me just ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an October 6, 2017 article from Foreign Policy entitled "The FBI's New U.S. Terrorist Threat, Black Identity Extremists," an October 13, 2017 letter from the CBC to Director Wray.
Pause it 1 second. I want you to go back. I misstated black nationalists. It is basically BLM people.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were setting that up for later, but to be incredibly clear, we're not talking. It would be ridiculous if it was like the Nation of Islam or whatever, because there's just no actual power or threat there. But they're talking specifically about Black Lives Matter and anti-police violence movement, including, by the way, one guy actually got in legal trouble with law enforcement based off of a story that was spread out of the Alex Jones show. That's what we're talking about.
Asking the police not to kill so many black people is basically identity extremism.
Well, but even if that is identity extremism, Wray just outlined the three qualifications that supposedly won the threshold that would warrant an investigation under counterterrorism activities. And there's no evidence that anybody associated with Black Lives Matter, or whatever they call, black identity politics, or whatever they're calling it, is involved there. I mean, this is just spying on, they used to spy on vegans too at one point. But here we go.
I support that.
We do not open investigations into anyone on the domestic terrorism side unless we have, one, credible evidence of a federal crime, two, credible evidence of a threat of violence, and three, in furtherance of an ideology. We don't have those three things, there's no investigation. So we don't investigate ideology, rhetoric, peaceful protest, anything like that.
Well, let me just ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an October 6, 2017 article from Foreign Policy entitled "The FBI's New U.S. Terrorist Threat, Black Identity Extremists," an October 13, 2017 letter from the CBC to Director Wray asking for a briefing, an August 8, 2019 article by the Young Turks entitled "Leaked FBI Documents Reveal Bureau's Priorities under President Trump." But I will just conclude by asking your commitment to meet with us again to give us an update of where we are, what it looks like, if in fact there have been arrests, surveillance, investigations on anybody under the old black identity extremists and now what it's consumed in. So I would just ask that you commit to briefing us again on that particular issue.
We'd be happy to keep the dialogue going.
That's very sweet.
You're a black identity extremist.
We will put a link in today's podcast description to Ken's piece, but good for him.
Read it. Read everything Ken does. Ken is all over this beat.
to get your reporting, to have actually sort of like a specific implications for that type of oversight. Very important. Lastly, speaking of oversight, they want Ken Cuccinelli to be they're talking about DHS head for this guy. They're talking about, they want him to be the customs immigration chief. He's acting now, of course, and as acting, you're not subject to any type of confirmation. Here is Ayanna Pressley questioning Cuccinelli. You'll remember Ken Cuccinelli worked for the governor, Bob, I can't remember his name, almost his conviction, McDonald, was overturned. But Bob McDonald was also very famous for, with Ken Cuccinelli, propagating the bill and the law that required a vaginal probe, to provide a vaginal probe ultrasound if you were seeking to exercise your right to an abortion in Virginia. This guy's super creep, and also, I don't know, to do this job, I think you got to be a little bit sociopathic, at least if it involves taking desperately ill children who are on a medical deferred from deportation program in this country and sending them out of the country, some of whom to die.
Medical procedures are only for people who don't want them.
Well, the idea is that, look, if you're not American, you don't deserve to have any life-saving type of procedures or care.
Earlier today in your testimony, okay, yes or no, Mr. Cuccinelli, did anyone at the White House play a role in this decision?
This was an agency decision solely, and other than discussion within the Department of Homeland Security.
Did Stephen Miller play a role in this decision or not?
So I'm not going to get into specific commentary back and forth, but I made this decision. The only discussions had over the course of the
again, for the record.
Yes, this is for the record, and as you noted, I'm under oath, so I want to be completely truthful.
And
I can't do that if I can't be complete.
So yes or no?
I'm not going to just answer the way you want me to answer. I'm going to give you an honest and accurate
answer. No, I'm asking you to answer yes or no. Was the president involved in this decision?
We cannot, as you well know, talk about content of discussions with
I'm sorry, but you
the
just
White
said
House.
that you made the decision.
Yes.
Okay, so was the president involved, yes or no? That should
I
be
made
simple.
this decision
Was Stephen
alone.
Play the other clip too. I mean, he is. Clearly, he makes the decision. But if the president says make this decision in this way, and then you make the decision, that has some bearing as to whether who's responsible for it.
He's really a dick about it too.
He also, this guy, and the idea, I think, of Ken Cuccinelli feeling like he's being questioned by a woman, a black woman is questioning me this way, I think is probably about as insulting to him as you can get.
He's got some Don Shooter energy.
Here he is. He also doesn't know if he's eligible to become the acting Homeland Security, even though that the Department of Justice has said he's not.
Mr. Cuccinelli, it has been widely reported that the Office of Legal Counsel at the DOJ determined that you were not eligible to serve as Acting Secretary of Homeland Security under Vacancies Reform Act and the Homeland Security Act. It has also been reported.
Pause it. Let me just make it clear. So he wants to be acting Homeland Security, and Trump wants him to be because he, as he proved in the last segment, he is willing to make decisions that Trump has told him to make, and also claim that Trump did not tell him to make those decisions. But there is statutes that govern who can function as an acting director of these agencies, and it has to be an internal person. And the idea is that, like, you can't purposely, and they've done a pretty good job of being able to sort of thread this needle, subvert the process where these positions are supposed to get some type of Senate confirmation. And so he's not eligible because there are people who are higher in the hierarchy who are pre-existing at the Department of Homeland Security. Now, Trump doesn't want those people because they're ostensibly not willing to do the horrible things he wants them to do. But here we go.
And Security Act. It has also been reported that the director of the Presidential Personnel Office at the White House has accepted this decision and briefed the president accordingly. Do you accept the decision of the DOJ and the Presidential Personnel Office that you are ineligible to serve as acting secretary?
I'm not privy to anything you just described, and so I cannot answer that question.
Well, it's public record, but, it's just, could you give me your visceral response?
As you may know, my last government post was Virginia state government, and I am no expert. I know areas of the law very well, but I don't know them all, and one I don't know very well is federal employment law, including things like the Vacancies Act and so forth, and I have not studied it or looked at
Sure,
it.
but again, the Department of Justice and the Presidential Personnel Office have ruled that you are ineligible to serve as acting secretary. So if asked to serve contrary to the law, will you decline?
I would not do anything contrary to the law. If I understood something to be contrary to the law, I wouldn't do it.
All right.
So now apparently
How convenient, he doesn't understand.
He doesn't understand that now remember, the Office of Legal Counsel is the one that decided that a sitting president can't be indicted. Now it's never been tested in a court, but they get pretty well reported, and they hold quite a bit of sway within the context of the administration. Apparently, Trump is looking for some type of loophole in the Federal Vacancies Act. This is being reported by Huffington Post. And this is according, I think, to the New York Times. The White House is considering a loophole that would allow Trump to bypass the Vacancy Act and potentially pick Cuccinelli or somebody else for the job. Under this route, the White House would tap someone to be the Assistant Secretary of Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction office, which is vacant. Then elevate that person to be the Acting Secretary of Homeland Security as a way of getting somebody into the hierarchy. Now, who knows? Who knows if that'll work? We'll see. But there it is, Ken Cuccinelli. He's only aware of what he can do in state law based upon vaginal probes. All right, let's do 10 or 12 more of these IMs, and then we'll get out of here. Braun's plan. I'm hoping for some clarification on how these debates work and if we can protest to just have one debate that isn't for profit. Is it the DNC decided we need 12 Democratic primary debates? Do they decide which networks are broadcasting and profiting on them? Are deals struck such that the DNC gets a share of the profits that ideally then goes towards Democratic campaigns? All of you are amazing. The DNC does make these rules. They basically say, we won't let you into these debates if you go and do a non-sanctioned debate. It used to be the League of Women Voters would do these, and then just like, I don't know, everybody would get a pool.
They did the primaries too?
Pool coverage. I believe so, yeah. And then that changed when both parties agreed, oh, we don't need to do this.
There's some cash to be made.
And so I don't know if the DNC sells the rights. If they get cash, they might. I would hope they would, but I don't know if they do. Missing link, Federal Elections Commission Chair Ellen Weintraub tweeted back on June 13th, I would have never thought that I needed to say this, and then attached the law against soliciting or receiving campaign aid from foreign nationals. She should be Jerry Nadler's first Trump impeachment witness to explain the law. Josh from Chicago. Hi, I'm on the Majority Report. Josh is in studio, ladies and gentlemen, but he really wanted to get an IM in. Mark Brent Lee. I was wondering why you were so excited at, I said something like, there's going to be 10 more IMs, and then you just sort of
Goody, gosh.
Mark Brent Lee. There's a second edit during the Kalinsky interview at 2:05:36. He was trying to explain the classical liberal thing from before, but it all edited out again. That is interesting. I would be interested in what Kyle has to say about that. King of all Pats fans. When you guys interviewed that Ryan guy yesterday, Could you smell the wussy through the phone? I'm embarrassed. He carries a proud Irish name. Go Pats.
I thought.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I heard somewhere that unfortunately Grimm was on some type of basically he made the left look really weak.
The ghost in the ultra secure server. Yes, Michael remembered chapter 10 of Democracy and Change, Lula Libre.
Word.
Meta Flight. One issue I have with co-ops is that they assume the market is correctly assessing value. Does the average Amazon worker deserve 6 times what the average Walmart worker makes just because Amazon has 6 times the company value per worker? Obviously, those are very large companies, but similar differences happen at smaller scales. This is why quite a few episodes back, I agreed with Sam when he mentioned the argument for what redistribution should be about having a functional society, rather than talking about what workers deserved on their labor. I'm not sure I understand why that's a problem unique to co-ops, though. Or why that's more problematic with co-ops.
It's a potential problem with co-ops, but like you're saying, it's a problem with everything right now under capitalism. I think it would still be a step in the right direction, but not as good as destroying capitalism and markets from the ground up.
But explain to me what the problem with co-ops is. It's just like, how do you determine what pay scale is?
Yeah, I guess some companies have like an inflated valuation, but I imagine, this co-opification of the economy isn't happening in a vacuum. So I imagine there would also be controls put in place on that.
Well, I would imagine that you would, that the way that you would establish, you would do some type of median industry wage where it wasn't clear in other ways, and you would set aside, I don't know, 10, 15% of your operating of your revenue automatically for some type of like capital improvement fund or expansion fund or something like that. I don't know how
you'd still have probably progressive income tax or something too. And if that was high enough, wouldn't it just incentivize the company to keep adding more jobs instead of, putting it towards
I don't know.
income?
It's conceivable a co-op, if they felt like, if everybody became like, if Deadspin became a co-op, that they'd all say like, well, we're not going to expand. We're just going to take more, But I think you could also just set the rules of the charter, like co-op charters. Like you can only, salaries are set at a specific median, and maybe, some algorithm based upon location of the majority of the workers. And then say, a 7%, a 10% annual raise based upon the size of the capital reserve fund, something like that. I don't know. But somebody smart about business could figure this out.
Bottom line, I'd rather have the workers decide those things than that Spanpfeffer guy.
Well, of course, because everybody has a direct vested interest in the maintenance of the company. Its existence. Glass-Steagall. Do you think it was a coincidence Pelosi kicked off impeachment the same couple of days you released the Crowder tapes? I can't shake the thought about the timing of this. Look, everybody knows you do not release a new product until after Labor Day. That is everybody does that. So that's why that happened. Now, did Pelosi and I talk about it? Not going to say. I'm just not going to say. Steph from Chicago, easy on the king. Oh, we did that. Colorado guy. This is a recently unearthed conversation from a White House luncheon between Gordon Sondland and an unnamed person. Can you grab me a slice of the pepperoni pizza, Gordon? Sondland, what? This isn't pizza. It's dough that's been formed into the shape of a disc and then had marinara sauce, cheese, and slices of pepperoni put on top of it and then baked in an oven. Unnamed person. Are you seriously the ambassador to the EU? Sondland, ambassador to what now? Rube Davin. I'm waiting for a candidate to say we already have universal health care. No one gets turned back when they go to the emergency room. The question should be, do we want to continue paying for it in the most expensive way possible? The fact is that people do get turned away from the insurance, the emergency room, but Your point still stands.
People reject ambulances or run away from them all the time because they know that it'll wreck them financially.
There should be an app to quick check if the ambulance you're going to get into is going to be, break you or not.
Last Prussian. Michael should be careful about the kink shaming. I've heard what he does with leather jackets. I don't know what that means. Pajama Boys, any possibility of a Majority Report live show in the New York City area time anytime soon? Sam's shirt is a little tight in the arms area. He could have definitely taken Mimosa Piven. Oh yeah. We're starting to look at Boston for early in 2020. And then we would probably follow that up with something in New York, maybe in the spring. But we will give you more information as that is available. David from Miami, probably. PG&E sucks. What would the steps that California could take to nationalize it? What does the transition look like, and how politically possible is it? Well, I don't know if California would nationalize it. California, the state theoretically could take it over and operate it. I mean, I guess that they could do, it's really what we're talking about is public ownership. In fact, here's Ro Kahana calling for public ownership of PG&E. How that would take place, I'm not 100% sure. I guess you would look at the valuation. The state might buy the shareholders out, but it could also be like, I don't know if there's some type of like eminent domain that you could argue the state would have the authority to do so, and I think it probably would. I would imagine there would have to be some process in which you determine a proper valuation for the utility that the state would then pay. Presumably, the state would continue to charge consumers a rate, but I would imagine that rate would be far more stable in terms of going forward. And the idea is that without having to provide, $4.6 billion over the course of 5 years to shareholders, that money gets plugged back into dealing with things like what we heard from the other IM, or, maintenance on its power substations. So I'm not exactly sure what Kahana is calling for, but I would imagine it would follow those type of lines.
And that's the gentle way to do it. Some governments have expropriated private companies without compensation, and that's fine too.
I don't subscribe to that. I think that might be a little bit difficult. I think you'll find a little more pushback in that we have laws and in this country.
I'm just saying they should count themselves lucky.
I think. You ever heard about expropriating without money? You're not a journalist.
Tim Pool's mom. Such a good point comparing Deadspin and Air America, but don't forget a major factor with Air America was the complete and total lack of air talent, Randy Rhoads notwithstanding, of on-air talent. Yes, that was also an issue. The Great Gaslight. Hey, Sam, you've made the analogy several times in the context of Trump extorting Ukraine about how if you're shooting at somebody and they're not aware of it, you're still committed a crime. While that's true, I think the salient point is that Trump knew the Ukrainians would eventually find out that the military aid was being delayed, and they would figure out, based upon his conversation with Zelensky, that he wanted personal political favors done when the money was released.
Yeah, connect the dots, you idiot.
It's a classic mafia tactic that Trump learned through his shady dealings in the 80s and 90s to send a message while still appearing to maintain some level of plausible deniability. Yes, but it's also been reported that, in fact, I think it was the day after I spoke to Tim Pool, the Times had a story saying the Ukrainians knew. They knew it was being withheld. But yes, I think you're right about that as well.
You fucking thought.
Wow. It's 67 women now? Is that right? The last article I think I saw was like 49 or 43 women who had allegations against Trump. Wrinkle fighter. Anyone else in the Des Moines area get out to the Bernie March against corporate greed? I just found out my fiance's ex is going to be there. If I can go and deal with a little rainy weather, you can all put up with a little rainy weather.
And your fiance's ex.
The rainy weather's not the problem.
Do it for Bernie.
Who cares if your fiance's ex is there? She's or he's your fiance now.
Gonna have to fight.
And I imagine there'll be so many people there that you won't even see this person.
It's going to be harder for the ex, I would think.
Really determined. Yeah, I don't
Everyone
know. It's hard
just
to figure
needs
out
to
who
go out in large enough numbers so this
in that
person doesn't have to
situation.
deal
You
with
never
their
know. It's very
fiance's ex.
difficult. Sometimes it's, hey, I'm winning now. Then it's like,
I just never understood. I just never
You're just
understand
doing
like
a remix.
backwards looking jealousy. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, save it for the present.
Exactly. Sam's new friend from Vegas. When talking about dog whistle racism, why don't people talk about a clip from Megyn Kelly interviewing a former neo-Nazi explaining it? Saw it only on here, but never see it anywhere else or again. And the final IM of the week. This is a good one. Definitely not Dave Rubin. So first you shame me because I'm a classical liberal. Now you want to kink shame my diaper play. F you forever, Sam. See you Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive